Whereas Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law, let us take a moment of personal reflection. Merci tout le monde. Thank you very much, everyone. Item 4, addition, deletion, or amendments. We have one amendment for item. We have one amendment, item 12. The notice of motion will be presented under item 14B. And under item 19, which is the closed session, it'll be a second item, and it will be under the same clause as personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. Anything else? Conseiller Lorrain?
Under section 17, councilmember items,
okay.
If I can add something there to bring up some budgetary items.
Budget items, okay. Councillor Associate?
I just wanted to add that invitation for council and staff to the Russell District Horticultural Society's 100th event.
Okay, so under 17B, Councillor Associate for invitation. Councillor Kanaski?
I'm just asking process-wise, for items that were on previous minutes, like follow-up items, where would those fall under? Example, just a status update on the Skidoo trail request and the bike path, stuff like that we covered in previous meetings.
Yeah, so I believe that's coming up. We can put it on the agenda, but I believe it's coming up February 19th. Yeah, it'll be coming up.
So can I check on a couple of other points from the minutes?
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll put it on, you can ask at the section under the minutes when we get into the minutes.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, I need a motion to approve the agenda as amended. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Conseiller Lorrain, seconded by Councillor Associate. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Item 6, disclosure pecuniary interest. I see none. Item 7, adoption of minutes of the special council minutes of January 14th, the regular council minutes of January 21st, special council minutes of January 24th and 25th. I need a mover and a seconder to put it on the table. Moved by Councillor Tanoski, seconded by Conseiller Lorrain. Questions? Councillor Tanoski.
Right, so I've got a few. So first of all, on the, from January 14th, status on the creation of extra committees, youth, senior committee, and so on. We had talked about that. Is there an update on that?
Yeah, at this point in time, I have looked into other municipalities to see what mandates they have, for example, for those type of committees. I've put some thoughts together, and I've sent it to Monsieur Leduc. And at our regular weekly meeting, we'll sit down and discuss those and see if we can tweak it and have something to council present. I'd anticipate probably early March.
Thank you. And so the right of way you said is coming through, like the one for the bicycle path. We had deferred a motion on parking around the Tim Hortons in Russell. Is that?
Monsieur Leduc,
That's on the 21st, from the 21st.
So, Madame du Conseil, bonsoir. That was being looked at by the bylaw department. Some measurements have taken place, and Mrs. Bordeaux is on vacation this week, so for the next council meeting, most likely there will be some response to that.
Okay. One last one. Also, we had asked staff to find out if the traffic study results for Boundary Road, just so we can communicate it better around the Amazon building, even though it's in Ottawa.
Monsieur Leduc, Madame Tremblay, si tu as de l'information là-dessus.
Bonsoir, donc I sent an email to the councillor that I've met 2 weeks ago to get a copy of the site plan and the traffic study as well, so we know the information and we'll be able to share whenever we have the response.
Merci.
Merci. Anything else? No? All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Item 8, presentations, we have none. 9, delegations, we have none. Under 10, consent items, we have none. Item 11, report from department and council committees. Item A, removal of part lock control report PD 07-2019. That council receives report PD 07-2019 dated February 4, 2019 and adopts a bylaw for the proposed application for the removal of part lock control submitted by Melanie Construction Inc., care of James D. Campbell of Campbell and Sabourin LLP, for the parcel of land described as Lot 90 on Plan 50M of 332, being Parts 1 and 2 on Plan 50R-10811, and known as 430-432 Twilight Avenue in the Village of Russell. Questions, comments, members of council? Anything to add from the administration? No? Move on to the next item. Item B, water and sewer unit allocation, Village of Limoges. That council receives report PD 08-2019 dated February 4th, 2019, and that council adopts as recommended by the planning department the allocation of the following projects. 1, Elacore Developments Inc., plan of subdivision, UCPR number 80 S08009, south of Doom Street. Limoges, 12 units of water and sanitary sewers. 2, Jeff and Denica Berubé, 252 Limoges Road, Limoges, 0.65 unit of water and sanitary sewers. 3, Valérie Brunet, 30 Oasis Street in Limoges, 0.65 unit of water and sanitary sewers. 4, Florent Bertrand, north of 340 Limoges Road, Limoges, 1 unit of water and sanitary sewers. And 5, François Rochon, 38 Duchesne Crescent, Limoges, 0.65 unit of water only, for connections to the Limoges municipal water and sewer systems from the nation municipality. Questions, comments, members of council? Councillor Tanoski?
Can I ask questions pertaining to the Annex 8? So that was the whole list of requests?
Yep.
So I just had a quick question pertaining to that appendix. So what percent will now be allocated based on these approvals that we're going to give tonight, and what's left in the bank for future development as a percentage? Does anyone have that?
Monsieur Leduc, Madame Tremblay?
The percentage is about 10% that
So
we're allocating.
we're looking for right now 10%,
Yeah.
which will leave 90% of that
Yeah.
still available. Thank you.
Okay. So, Conseiller Laurent?
I have a couple questions. So, the first one is, under the, I'm gonna say, it's on page 5 of the report, so we're almost on there now. And it talks about, I guess, a bylaw that was put in place in 2011, or an update in 2011, but I guess it was from 2005, if I'm not mistaken, that identifies 15% priority, 65%, 40%, and 20%. Is that not something that we should be looking at in terms of percentage allocations for that area? I mean, I know we've been sitting on some potential commercial opportunities or some larger residential opportunities, rather than, sitting on 20% of infill and 15% priority, does it make more sense to bump up our general development?
Monsieur Leduc, Madame Tremblay, I believe that's in your business plan, or you're working on it?
Yeah, so through Mr. Mayor, again, this bylaw is in the business plan to be reviewed in 2019. Just for your information, this percentage, just to keep in mind, is the same for the entire Limoges, Embrun, and Russell. So maybe in the new bylaw, it's something that we should consider to make a difference between the different villages. So it's a report that will come back to council. And just for your information, in 2005, the initial bylaw, the percentage was not the same. So basically, it was 25% for priority, and it was 65% for general development and 10% for infilling. So we had switched over the years because we felt that infilling was the most popular. So we had to adjust throughout the years. So it was not the same in 2005 and when we changed it in 2011. So we'll have to come back in front of council, obviously, to review those percentage.
Say that.
So then is it out of the question to think that outside of this bylaw being changed, that if somebody were to come in and we had the allocations available, but they fell outside of these amounts, that council could resolve to update that bylaw at that point in time to allocate the extra allocation?
Madame Tremblay?
So through you again, let's keep in mind that those comes in front of council every time for resolutions. The council could overrule the bylaw at any time. So if I present, what I'm presenting tonight is to respect those percentage, but at the end of the day, it's council's decision to allocate more than those percentage and guides the administration to review that bylaw based on the percentage I presented.
Right, so essentially if somebody made an application that was outside this norm, your recommendation would be based on this, we recommend against, but council has the opportunity
Exactly, yep.
Perfect.
Okay, that was one of the questions.
Okay.
And then the last question I have on it is more procedural. And this may be Mr. Leduc that would answer this. I'm just curious, we're talking about water and sewer allocations in this report, correct?
Yep.
So why would the Executive Director of Infrastructure not be on this report? I mean, I see it submitted by the Planning Department. I see it approved by Mr. Leduc and Mr. Godin. But nowhere do I see the Infrastructure Services who manage the water and sewer.
Mr. Leduc?
Okay.
Take one of them.
Well, for one thing, Nation municipality is providing the services of water and sewer to our residents in Limoges. And when allocations are being given out, it's always given out by the planning department. So the relevancy of the department to take care of it at this point, since we're not taking care of any infrastructure at all, and it's only allocation based, that's why at this point in time, only planning is responding to this.
Because we're speaking of Limoges, so.
Yep, exactly. It's strictly Limoges in this case.
Madame Tremblay?
And I just want to add to what Mr. Leduc has mentioned is that every time that we allocate water and sewer in Embrun and Russell, the infrastructure department is involved into the allocation process. As we send an email, they confirm that it's available and then we proceed this way. So it's just because Limoges is a bit different and is not
Because
like,
it's
like
Nation
Mr. Leduc
Township
mentioned, but for
infrastructure.
the rest is the infrastructure department involved as well.
So I'm gonna speak to council then and ask the question, don't we think that's time to change that then? I mean, the infrastructure department may have projects on the go in Limoges that counter this report. So why would they not be involved in talking about this project? And any other project that comes up from an allocation perspective, even though it's Limoges allocations and they have minimal work to do, wouldn't they have other information that may be vital to the report?
Monsieur Leduc?
I think that matter will be an issue and reality once we bring to council the EA study in the end of March or early April. I think then if ever the council decides to provide services into Limoges and that becomes a reality, then therefore, yes, that will change. The dynamics will change then. So when this is coming at that point. I know that some people have requested me to say, well, I've been asked to provide my number of units I'm looking for, but I don't know what's going on with the EA coming in March. Me neither. So until we get that report from the department itself, we'll know more then in early April as to what's the role of the infrastructure department.
Great.
Which was the basis of my original comment as to why they weren't involved in this, in the allocation of these items. That's it for this one, thank you.
Okay, merci. D'autres questions, commentaires? No? Move on to item C, dedicated gas tax funding agreement. The council receives report FS 02-2019 dated February 4th, 2019, and that the proposed bylaw be adopted as presented, authorizing the mayor and the treasurer to enter into agreement between the Township of Russell and the Province of Ontario related to the funding commitment made by the Province of Ontario to the municipality under the dedicated gas tax funds for the Township of Russell's transportation program. Questions, comments, members of council? Councillor Tanoski.
So I need to confirm that, so the 148K was already in the 18-19 budget, is that correct?
I believe that's correct, Monsieur Godin.
Yes, that's correct. And in fact, in 2019, we did budget an increase because we're expecting an increase in the 2019 to 2020 grant. But yes, this amount here is budgeted in the 2018 budget and in the 2019 budget.
Okay, and so I just want to confirm, so the agreed amount was 111,000 and up to 148,000, is that correct? So our allocation is 148,000, because the agreement states up to, like, if we're budgeting 148, or if we had 148, the agreement that I read said up to 148 with an agreed amount of 111,000. So I just want to confirm, is that 148 guaranteed for us, or is that the maximum that we can get?
Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Godin.
No, the 148,000 is confirmed. We're going to be receiving that.
Okay.
We've received 111 for the 2018 portion,
Yeah.
and we'll be receiving a second payment once this agreement is signed.
Thank you.
D'autres questions? Councillor Lorrain.
Yeah, you said something interesting there, and I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. You said that that we're expecting an increase in 2019, yet throughout the budget process, I understood that we had been approved through our government contact for an increase. I think the number was around 175,000. Are we expecting an increase, or have we been approved for an increase?
Monsieur Godin.
No, so yes, to answer your question, it's not confirmed yet. We did receive documentation where they presented the rates based on the kilometers, and it was 2 cents going up to 2.5 cents. So that's how the $170,000 is estimated in the revenues.
Okay. So when would we ever confirm that?
Monsieur Godin, Madame Tremblay.
So, we have sent emails, so we're waiting for confirmation, but that's how the calculation was done, is based on that increase.
Okay. And will we know or have a good sense of that before we approve the budget?
We
On the
could
19th?
try again and get the information as soon as possible, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
D'autres questions, commentaires sur ce sujet? Non? Quelque chose d'autre à ajouter, Monsieur Godin? No. Move on to item D, Infrastructure Services Semi-Annual Activity. The council receives report ISPW WAT WW 01-2019 dated February 4th, 2019. Monsieur Bourgon. Would you like to present a little bit of c'est le temps de ta salle.
Donc, le rapport en annexe, vous pouvez voir un résumé des projets de 2018 qui ont été complétés ou ceux qui continuent au courant de l'année 2019. Mais dans mon rapport, je voudrais surtout attirer l'attention aux membres du conseil sur les GPS qui ont été installés dans tous les véhicules municipaux. We completed last year the installation of GPS in every township's vehicle, which every department head is can monitor their fleet of every department. So I want to take the opportunity to show council, there's a few slides I put in the report, but tonight I can actually show council what it looks live when we looked at our system. So I can actually see that we have a vehicle, a snowplow in Embrun doing snow removal as we speak.
So it allows us to see within the township where all our vehicles are at every time, at every moment throughout the day. And we can look back to different point in time, like to backtrack. So if I use this snowplow here as an example, I can actually see all the trips he's done throughout the day. Et aussi, ça nous permet de voir quel opérateur conduit chaque pièce d'équipement. Donc, ce matin, nos équipes de déneigement ont sorti sur la route. Donc, en sélectionnant différents segments. Donc, ça me démontre en un clin d'œil, de façon rapide, tout le trajet que cette déneigeuse-là accomplit là, dans sa routine ce matin. So, if we look a bit closer, we can see the speed that the snowplow was actually traveling at every moment, and if the plow was actually down or up, and if he's applying salt. So that's extra features that we have for the snowplows.
So when we have residents that say, you know, went by my place at 80 kilometers an hour and snow went flying, then we can actually verify that information.
Exactly. With the address and the approximate time of day, we can actually validate that information. And depending on the address, we know which snowplows, since all their routes are pre-established. So we can track and see and validate the information at that time.
Conseiller Larin?
Is this, Mr. Leduc, is this something that's gonna be put into all municipal vehicles? I don't know if that's Mr. Godin, Mr. Bourgon's comment on who manages the entire fleet of vehicles, but.
Monsieur Bourgon?
So every township's vehicle is now equipped with a GPS.
Not just Public Works, but
All of vehicle, like our department purchased the unit and manage the installation in every vehicle, like all new ones or when it gets transferred. But then it's up to every department to be able to monitor their fleets.
Okay. The next question I have is, can they turn it off?
No.
Staff. Right? Because I've heard in the past of complaints from residents where they see these vehicles out at night, on the weekends, and they assume personal use on these vehicles. So obviously, if they're able to turn off the GPS, then maybe they're using it for personal use. But you're saying that the staff who are using these vehicles cannot turn off the GPS, and you would be able to monitor exactly what they've done.
Exactly. It could happen if they remove the unit entirely, but then we would know at that time.
It's not just a flick of a switch; it's actually dismantling the whole thing.
Exactly. Okay. And also, there's a fob system that every employee needs to swipe before using the vehicle, so that way we know which operator is using which equipment.
But I'm saying, that's only for infrastructure services, though, right? The fob?
Yeah, but that device, it's installed in every vehicle.
In every vehicle?
But that feature can be, that's a discretion really of, that's an option that can be turned off, but by the administrator only.
Okay.
Councillor Associate?
Yeah, this is a very useful tool because, as Mr. Bourgon knows, we had a resident that didn't believe their road was getting plowed, and he was able to verify that they had been by 3 times that day. So that is very useful for us. So thank you.
Councillor Tarnowski?
Mr. Bourgon, just wanted to congratulate you and your team. I see over 90% of the projects completed, which is awesome. I just wanted to quickly ask a little bit more about the water leak detection study. That was deferred to 2019. Could you just remind me the reasoning behind it?
Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Bourgon?
Yes, Monsieur Maire. It was deferred because the first step was to replace all our water meters.
Makes sense, yeah.
And then we'll be able to, that's going to be our next tax. We'll see too. And plus with that as well, we're doing lots of water valve repairs. So we know we're removing some leak percentage as well in our system that way.
Thank you very much.
Since it was mentioned, just out of curiosity, how's the replacement program going at this point in time? Are we getting a lot of residents contacting the number?
We actually sent a letter to our second phase in Embrun,
Oh, okay.
since we didn't have enough people calling in to do appointments. And so, but we have extra installers, so we're doing the door-to-door is more effective than the amount of people taking appointments, but it's moving quite well.
Okay, thank you. D'autres questions? No? Move on to the next item. Item E, community grants. The council receives report PR 02-2019 dated February 4th, 2019, approves the following department's recommendations for community grants donations in 2019 to the following groups. 1, to approve an in-kind grant in the amount of $309 to King Club of Russell for the rental of the Emblem Community Center for Beyond the Basics Health and Wellness Conference on February 9, 2019. 2, to approve an ad hoc grant in the amount of $750 to King Club of Russell for Beyond the Basics Health and Wellness Conference on February 9, 2019. 3, to approve an in-kind grant in the amount of $1,156 to King Club of Russell for the rental of the Emblem Community Center for the Hairspray Roast on November 30th, 2019. 4, to approve an in-kind grant in the amount of $180 to the Second Russell Scouting for the rental of the Russell Community and Sports Center for a first aid training on January 26 and 27, 2019. Questions, comments, members of council? Councilor Laurin?
I have one comment, and it touches all three of the first three items. I think it's great that the King Club of Russell are looking to put money in the bank for a project for a pool or an aqua center or whatnot. I would like that the verbiage be changed from the future township aqua center to a future aqua center, because the township has not endorsed a project as of yet for an aqua center. I spoke to somebody at the King Club just before coming in. They said that should be acceptable. I'm going to send the verbiage over to them to review, and I think that verbiage should be used in any documentation that the King Club put out. And that way, I find that the term "the future township aqua center" is misleading to the public because it hasn't been endorsed, and I think that they want to continue to put money in the bank for a future center. Then that's great, but I think at this point in time, I can't endorse these three items if they're directly related to the township aqua center, because that is saying that we have one on the horizon.
So are you just asking, well, we'll take this item out to vote separately, Madame Carmé-Laflamme. At that point in time, you're looking to change the verbiage in this report?
Correct.
Okay, so we can make that amendment at that point in time.
Correct.
Councilor Associate?
Yeah, I just had a question. Number 1 was for the hall rental for the health and wellness event this Saturday. What was the second one for?
Monsieur Leduc, Madame Guitar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. So you mean the one for Beyond Fitness, the $700
Yeah.
It's to help them out with the cost of advertising and buying all kinds of stuff that they need, so.
Okay. Thank you.
D'autres questions, commentaires? Councilor Kanowski?
My thing just closed here, but when we talk about hall rentals, we include slab and park space and everything else. I would just think that shouldn't be seen like that as just overall rentals, space rentals, as opposed to strictly halls, because it's so much more than just that. That was one question or point I wanted to make. And the other point I wanted to make is I see a per hour, like if we break down all the hours rented, I think it's in 2017, again, it's closed up on here, but it was based on a total hours, yeah.
Sorry,
Madame
Mr.
Guitar?
Mayor, I think Mr. Tarnowski is in the wrong report.
Or in the community grants report?
Oh, shut up.
You'll get
open it. No, I thought I was excuse me.
All right. Quelque chose d'autre à ajouter à ce point-ci, Madame Guitar?
No.
No? Okay. That was item E. We'll move on to the next one. Parks and Recreation Semi-Annual Activity Report. The council receives report PR 03-2019 dated February 4th, 2019. Madame Guitar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I think I did praise my department at the budget, so I'll spare you tonight a bit for that one. Unfortunately, well, no, maybe not unfortunately. Fortunately for the recreation department, there's a lot of numbers and stats, and because I think it's more visual, and I think it's nice to see that from year to the other year we are growing, and the revenues are nicer. So I think it's important to bring this up. I just want to point, there was a slight mistake in the ice rentals. That is unfortunate because the numbers for 2018 were not exactly the right ones. Unfortunately, we added the AR, the accounts receivable, at the end of the year in the amount that we had on our computer, on our FMW. And unfortunately, they were already accounted for, so we had to deduct them. So really, the 2018 revenues for Russell would have been $288,000. The one for Emblem would have been $339,550. So the total for both arenas would have been $628 instead of $661. So there is a big difference. So I needed to bring this up to your attention. And the one section that we did not really touch at during the budget was the grant applications that were done in 2018. So you find this at page 8. The first one, we had made an application for a small accessible park. We got a negative response about 2 weeks ago for that one. We're still waiting for the big accessible park, that one, and I even sent an email. We're still waiting for an answer. They haven't made up the decisions for that one, so we're still hopeful for that one.
That's the one that I forwarded the information to our MP, is that correct?
That's right. And the last one, we just received a positive answer last week. That was to do minor repairs to the Emblem Hall Foundation and Parging, and also some minor repairs in the Club Joie de Vivre Hall, where we had some water issues with. So we were granted $12,384. So we were happy with this one. So hope, and obviously I always like to say that nothing of these numbers could be attainable if I wouldn't have a great team behind me. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam. Questions, comments, members of council? Conseiller Larrain?
I have 2 quick questions. The first one on the semi-annual report for under the hall rentals. You have amounts in there for the Russell Arena slab for 2018, which is about $9,600. Yet we have nothing in there for 2017.
That must be a mistake. That must be a typo. Because
Okay.
we were renting this slab
That's
for ball hockey.
that's my question.
Yeah, I could definitely get that to you.
Okay.
For sure.
And the second question that I have is, it's great that we see the report and we see the comparison year over year to the actuals. Is there a way to see how we did to budget?
Oh, sure.
Right, because that's important. I mean, it's great that we got $628,000 for the 2 arenas, but were we expecting 640? I don't know the answer.
Okay.
Right?
That's something we can look at.
And it's something to highlight your department, because if it was 610 and you got 628, well then that's fantastic. So.
Madame Bitton?
Yeah, I could definitely do that. I didn't want to overfill the report with numbers, because you can also see the budget numbers on the financial statements where we get at the end of the month. But for sure, and it's on a 6-month basis, so I'll be pleased to do that for sure.
Councillor Tarnowski?
Okay, I'll do it. Sorry about that again. So again, if I go back to the hall rentals section, you show 5,009, almost 5,010 hours of rentals on that table for 2018 for a revenue of 85,410. So roughly, if I break that down on a per hour, so $17.05 generate a revenue per hour of rental. And so it'd be interesting to see how that fares compared to 2017. So I don't have any hours for 2017. So that would be good moving forward. The other thing I noticed, and it's just more of a question, I guess. At the Dome, on the numbers for the Dome, I see very high percentage of the memberships are monthly memberships. And in comparison, for example, to the annuals and the 3-month packages and so on, the semi or annual membership. So we have a large portion of people that just rent for a month at a time. And I'm not sure how this works, but if I was running that, I would kind of say that that's riskier of losing customers as opposed to getting like larger memberships. Is there something we do, like we give a bit of a discount, right, for a semi-annual or an annual, right? So I was just wondering if that's something in terms of a risk in looking at, why is everyone just going month by month? Is it because they're not sure? I don't know.
Madame Thal?
I think it's a more financial reason. It's not everybody that has $500 to just give a hit. There's a lot of young people that are using, for example, the gym. So they have more available funds, I think, on a monthly basis. And for us, the risk at the beginning was to see those passes being renewed, and they are being renewed. So definitely there's something that we're doing good. And obviously they're more expensive on a monthly basis, so we're generating more revenue. So, and I think honestly this is what it is. It's financial.
D'autres questions, commentaires? Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Godin?
Merci, Monsieur Mayor. So just to get back to your question earlier on, Councilor Warren, about the comparing the actuals versus the budget, which you asked specifically for the arena ice rentals. So the budgeted amount of revenues was $649,000. 649. 649, and the actual was 628.
So we're short roughly $21,000.
Around that.
So that's why I wanted to see. I was asking for the whole thing, but when that one was brought up, so then we see exactly what the actuals are, right?
Do we have any suspicions or ideas why we're short $21,000 in revenue? Was it just less ice time rented? Was it Monsieur Leduc, Madame Bouton?
Well, like I mentioned during budget time, we did lose $25,000 of those hours that were given back to us. Fortunately, we had a 5% raise that we could account for from September to December, and we were also able to sell back some hours. So, I think the 21 is all between all of them.
All of them.
Yeah.
Conseiller Larin? Quelque chose d'autre à ajouter? No? We'll move on to the next item. Item G, amendment to procedural bylaw 2018-026, chart term report CL04-2019, January 21st, 2019. We've had this for a couple of weeks now. If members of council have questions. Conseiller Larin.
Yes, at 3.1.1, we're adding a section in there where we don't have the ability to request the suspension of the rules of procedure to discuss a topic on a given night for a notice of motion. My question is, why can't we rephrase it to say that although the suspension is allowed, the actual modification of the bylaw can't be done on the same evening? That way there you get the discussion going, you bring the bylaw back at the next meeting, and you're all prepared versus waiting 2 weeks to have the discussion and put the bylaw through at the same time, because it may need to be modified again. So
I think, Monsieur Leduc, Madame Camille Laflamme, my interpretation or my thought process on the matter is that as a council, we want to be an open and transparent council. We want to give residents the time to know what's on the agenda. Therefore, if we're bringing a notice of motion at the last minute and we start discussions on that topic, the residents didn't necessarily have the time to review or to be part of that discussion. Whereas if we're giving, the whole point of the notice is to put it on the table, let everybody know, we will be discussing this in 2 weeks. I think this is specific to when it's when a notice of motion is being introduced by a member to amend a bylaw specifically. So if it's not in relation to a bylaw, then a notice of motion could be presented at the same meeting. Is that correct, Madame Camille Lefebvre? We could suspend the rules if it's not a changing of a bylaw. Is that so?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. If you can discuss it openly at any time for anything else, why can't you have the discussion on the first night, but just state in the bylaw that notwithstanding the fact that you can suspend the rules of procedures to discuss it, you will not be able to make alterations to the bylaw that specific evening. That way there we don't hold up the process and allow for that 2-week span to have the bylaw then updated properly and come back to council for adoption. Because every other motion you bring up, you can suspend the rules of procedure for, discuss, and vote on at the same meeting. So I see here that it's no different with a bylaw than it would be for a resolution, but I'm willing to concede the fact that we don't change the bylaw that evening, but you can at least suspend the rules of procedure to discuss it.
Okay. Madame Camille Laflamme, the notice of motion, the way the procedural rules are written, if a member of council has submitted it to be part of a package, and then that can't be suspended, but if he comes in at the last minute. I guess where I'm going with this, I have no problem if it's part of the package and the public has had the opportunity to see the notice of motion before it's discussed or know that it's on the agenda, that's not a problem. But I think my issue is when you come in at the last minute to put it on the table, nobody knew it was coming, members of council didn't know it was coming, and members of the public didn't know it was coming. I think if we can word it in a way that if it's, I would be open to your suggestion if it's part of the agenda package, if it's put in, if members of council put it in place in time to have it as part of the package itself, I'd be okay with it because people would have seen that the notice of motion was part of the agenda. My suggestion, that would be a fair compromise, that we can discuss it that night because people have seen it in the agenda and they decide if they want to be present at the meeting or not.
But that's part of the whole notice of motion process, that you're allowed to bring it at the council meeting and allow for the suspension rules of procedure to deal with it. What's the difference with it's for a bylaw or for anything else in the township? That's where I'm saying you can do it for anything other than that. I don't think that's right that we exclude the discussion of bylaw items and that we're not even voting on it that night, at that point in time.
Well,
so
it's up for council to decide. Personally, I'd rather see notice of motion be on the agenda and discussed in 2 weeks, just like we have a notice of motion this evening that was put on the table 2 weeks ago. I would be fine if that was standard practice, regardless if it's a bylaw or not, that we don't suspend the rules of procedure, but this is what's presented at this time.
okay.
So we have two different opinions here, I guess, members of council, if you want to chip in your thoughts on the matter, or if there's anything else to add from the administration. Councillor Associate?
I would agree with Councillor Moran on that one, that we should be able to suspend the rules of procedure to discuss something.
To discuss that same evening?
Yeah.
Okay, so without the public having notice of it, that's correct? Just to be clear.
No, not necessarily that they wouldn't, like, for instance, what happened with your notice of motion 2 weeks ago, the public wasn't aware and we weren't aware.
And it's being discussed this evening.
Yeah.
But you could have suspended the rules of procedure and dealt with it that evening. That was an option to you that you chose not to take.
Right, because I didn't feel it was fair to put something on the table and make a decision without notifying the public that it was being discussed. So I just want to make sure Councillor Associate is aware that Monsieur Lorrain, Councillor Lorrain is saying he wants to be able to put something on the table, discuss it that night. In regards to a bylaw, he says he's willing to not be able to vote on that item, that would only come back in 2 weeks. Is that, if I understand properly?
Go ahead, yep, keep going.
No, but that's what you're suggesting, correct? That you
I'm
could
suggesting that we follow the same rules of notice of motion that we've always followed, except for the fact that if it's for a bylaw, we cannot vote on it that evening. That's the concession to the notice piece
Okay.
that I'm willing to throw in. I'm not asking to change anything that has always been available to council members and that has been used on many of occasions by yourself and other members of council.
Yep.
So I'm not trying to change any rules. In fact, I'm trying to make it harder for council at that point in time, because we cannot vote on the bylaw that specific evening. So I think you're twisting the words a little bit to suit yourself there, so.
No, not at all, Councilor Lorraine. I think the reason that this is being presented as a new procedure is because we want to try and improve the current situation to avoid those scenarios. All we keep hearing about municipal government is that we want to be open and transparent. And personally, I feel that if we're going to put something on the table, discuss it, and vote on it without the public being aware of the discussion.
Then why aren't all notices of motion here saying that you can't suspend the rules of procedure?
Well, because
Because you can vote on everything.
I haven't risen that point yet. You're making the suggestion that you would like. My suggestion is that it should be all notice motions, that nothing is voted on the same day that it's brought. That is my opinion. So,
I agree with that. That nothing is voted on that day.
the same,
Yeah.
do you want the discussion to happen that same day?
I think we should be able to discuss it, you know, but that no decision would be made, and then it would be brought back. And then the public would have time to be aware.
Okay. Councillor Tarnowski.
So in my short time here, didn't we go through this process once already where we did suspend rules? And then we had some challenges with staff and the fact that we weren't prepared enough to have a good discussion on the subject because we weren't, like the staff members didn't have the information and so on, and it caused all kinds of problems. Am I wrong?
No, that's correct. We had a situation where a notice of motion was brought forward. Administration didn't have the opportunity to review the notice of motion, and the discussion happened whether we approve that or not. So I think that's where this clause is coming into effect. It's by bringing a notice of motion, you give not only the public the opportunity to comment and to see what's going on 2 weeks down the road, but also gives the administration the opportunity to prepare, to give their opinion and not just at the last second as well.
So I think further to that, I would be in agreement to anything where we have enough time to have a discussion based on proper facts and having all the information from staff. I'm concerned that if we bring something up last minute, certainly the fact that we don't make a decision alleviates my concern. But if we bring anything up where we don't have access to all the information and we're asked to make a decision without enough notice, I'm concerned that that's problematic. Even though it's been done in the past, I think it's problematic.
Okay. I think as well as the fact of having the conversation in the first place, you might not have all that information required to make an educated conversation at that point in time. But Councillor Lorraine is making a suggestion. Councillor Lorraine?
Yes, I'm making a suggestion that this gets reworded to the fact that you can still suspend the rules of procedure for an item, but that you can't vote on an item for the bylaw. Plain and simple.
Okay.
So no changes to anything, other than the fact that we cannot vote on a bylaw the same evening of a notice of suspension. Everything else remains the same. That's my recommendation.
That's your recommendation. I'm making the recommendation that a notice of motion is only to be discussed at the next regular meeting. That way it gives the opportunity to the public to be aware of what's going on, gives the opportunity to the administration to formulate comments and opinion on the subject, and it gives the opportunity to a council member to discuss with the person bringing forward a notice of motion what is involved. So, which direction? We've got two different opinions on this one. Councillor Associate.
So we'd be able to discuss it at the following meeting then?
Yes, it would be, for example, like tonight we have the notice of motion that was presented 2 weeks ago. It would be discussed at the following meeting. Discussed at the following meeting, giving the opportunity of the public and the administration to.
I'm okay with that.
Councillor Kanoski?
Yeah, I think that goes in line with the openness and transparency. I agree with that.
Okay, so this section would need a little bit of tweaking to say suspension of the rules and regulations shall be out of favor under, it'll be out of order. Suspension of rules and regulations not permissible. The suspension of rules and regulations shall be out of order for a notice of motion. Councilor Lara?
Can I just ask what the definition of a notice of motion will be now then? Why wouldn't it just be a report on the agenda if that's the case? I thought the whole reason for a notice of motion is for council members to bring up something that the staff either hasn't brought up or they want staff to look at.
That's correct.
So why wouldn't we just go to staff and get something put on the agenda 2 weeks later? Like, I don't see the purpose of the notice of motion now.
Well, a notice of motion is to be presented by a member of council, and then that's discussed, and then council as a whole would ask the administration to provide something. Individual council members don't have the ability to say to an administration, give me a report on this subject. Council as a whole has to agree for something to move forward. So that's hence the wording, a notice. We are giving notice that this motion is coming forward in 2 weeks' time. That's the point of the notice of motion. Any other questions on the Councilor Lara?
I have a few.
Okay.
Let's see. Section 10.3.11 of the actual bylaw itself. It's not in the changes because it wasn't one of the changes, but I'm requesting one. I'm just going to find it right now.
10.3.11.
10.3.11, I believe is the section I'm speaking to for this next item. My glasses are very good.
That would be the resolutions.
Also the resolutions.
Article 16.
10.311.
Yes, sorry, so that has to do with question period. Since the procedure bylaw is open for discussion, I would,
Just before we go there, clarification, Madame Camille Laflamme. It's open for the notice of what's been put on the agenda. Any other changes not listed here, do those have to be brought back in a subsequent meeting, or could they be applied right away?
Since there was no notice on those specific one, it would have to be brought back. We can mention them tonight and bring it back.
So we could, technically, we could approve what's been, what's proposed in this chart tonight, and we can modify what's in this chart because we gave notice on these items, but something that wasn't listed in the chart, we would give notice tonight and approve at the following meeting. Is that correct?
Correct.
hold on,
Okay.
we talked at the last meeting that the chart wasn't necessary, that the chart was only there for information purposes, and that we couldn't discuss anything at the last meeting. We couldn't even ask a question, which this would have been my question. Can we make changes to it at the actual time frame? The notice was that we were opening the procedure bylaw for changes. The notice isn't for these specific changes. This was a chart that was proposed as some of the items. We should still be able, and we have done this in the past, where we've discussed other sections of the bylaw at the same time, which is just like the same as you open any bylaw, every section is open for discussion. So why is it different with this one?
I'll defer to the clerk, Madame Camille Laflamme.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, like I mentioned at the last meeting, so at section 23.2, it says amendment or repeal. No amendment or repeal of this bylaw or any part thereof shall be considered at any meeting of the council unless notice of the proposed amendment. So that's why the chart was there. The proposed amendment or repeal has been given at a regular meeting with a vote of approval of 2/3 of vote present and eligible to vote. The waiving of the notice is prohibited. So we had to propose all the amendments. And it was mentioned also that council members could send any amendments or any new additions or removal that they wanted so that it would be brought back at this meeting for discussion.
But you wouldn't let me ask that question.
No, we
And
couldn't
we've done
because
this
it
in-
was only a notice.
Yes, but under every single time we've opened this bylaw, we've been able to make changes at this table to what was being requested. So I fail to see how this is any different.
because as we move on, we learn from our mistakes, and two wrongs don't necessarily make a right. So we're following procedure. That's in our procedure.
Okay, so then I'm giving notice that I would like these following sections looked at the next meeting.
So, Madame Camille Laflamme?
Yes.
So Councillor Lorrain could send you the items that he would like in the chart and the suggested changes, and that could be part of the next agenda, which will be discussed at that point in time, Sissa. And
If we know tonight, that would be the notice.
tonight
Tonight?
is this notice.
If not, then I would bring it
So I will
back
list them off right now then?
if
perfect.
you want.
I would like under 10.3.11, question period, it says question period on meeting of the day. I would like a 10.3.11.1 or A, whatever you wanna call it. And that we re-add a general question period at the end of the meeting. And then a B, that question period for special meetings be added to the agendas. What else? Then at 17.11, I have a question on that. Just getting there now. I just need clarification on the wording here. So, the section talks about mayor chair need not vote, and it states the chair shall vote as any other member when the vote is to be recorded. In all cases, the chair can, but is not obliged to vote whenever his vote will affect the result. That is, the chair can vote either to break or to cause a tie, or in the case of 2/3 vote requirement, he can vote either to cause or to break the attainment of the necessary 2/3 vote. And I'm questioning the second sentence, and should that not read that is the chair cannot vote either to break or cause a tie? It seems to be off there, saying two different things. So if we can look at that section and bring that one back as well.
Okay.
Thank you. I think that's all of the items that I was touching on the procedure bylaw this evening.
Thank you. Other questions, comments, members of council? Non? Quelque chose d'autre à ajouter de l'administration? Non? OK. J'ai déjà demandé qu'on sépare celle-là.
That's already a separate item.
Okay. Move on to item H, Bill 68 update, Council Code of Conduct, Staff Policy, Report CL 05-2019. The council receives Report CL 05-2019 dated February 4, 2019, and approves the proposed bylaw for the Council Code of Conduct and 2, proposed bylaw for council staff relations. Questions, comments, members of council? Councilor Associate.
Yes, it was on number 8.
Which one exactly?
It was refrain from advocacy township business on social media. So for instance, sharing events, which I think we all do, like the local flavors and what have you, and putting posts up about township events, like the floodplain mapping last week, and things like that. I've been sharing regularly, so I just wanted some clarification on that. Also events at the library and what have you.
Okay, Monsieur Leduc, Madame Camille Laflamme. So on peut juste monter ça. That's in the Code of Conduct, correct?
Yes.
So is that referring to number 8 communications
Yes.
at page 11 in the Code of Conduct?
I'll just bring it up on the screen.
I didn't quite listen well because I was trying to find which code you were referring to, so I'm sorry.
Okay, it was number 8,
Yes.
and it said refrain from advancing township business through social media, So, so like, there was social events and what have you, and different.
Ok. Monsieur Leduc, on va juste attendre qu'il mette ça à l'écran, là. Non, tu peux continuer dans le...
So,
Ok. Clarification, Monsieur Leduc?
In section
C'est
nine,
bon.
no?
I was gonna say,
Well, maybe it's 9, sorry,
Social media?
yeah,
there's 2 sections also. 8 also refers to the.
yeah.
On commence avec le numéro 8, puis on peut discuter.
Yeah, my understanding of number 8, Mr. Mayor, I was gonna say, Councillor Associé, if you're sharing social groups events, in this case, you're not advancing township business. So you're free to share that or to comment if you wish. That would not be a restriction.
Ok. Councillor Lorrain?
Yeah, so if Councilor Tarnowski doesn't have any questions on this, I have many. So I just wanted to give him the opportunity before I went.
Okay, no, please go.
All right, so if we can go to the top of this policy. And we're dealing with management responsibilities. So in it, it says the clerk is responsible.
would be page 3.
In it, it says the clerk is responsible to ensure that council is aware of and act in compliance with this code and its related policies. So how is the clerk going to ensure that all of council acts in compliance with?
Monsieur Leduc?
I think a second paragraph may address that. It's upon receiving some complaints or some disclosure of individuals. That's kind of how far can the clerk go, unless a person observes something, unless the clerk observes something. But basically, we're counting more on the written disclosures than anything else.
So that's why I think that the first paragraph should be amended and just says that ensure that council is aware of and they act in according to the policy, because it sounds there that she's policing council on this conduct on this code of conduct when it's the integrity commissioner, if I understand correctly, that will be policing it. So that's my first item. The second one, it's under reporting.
Sorry, Monsieur Leduc?
Joanne, do you have that clearly, what Monsieur Lorraine asked for the changes?
No, I'm rereading it and I'm not sure which word you want to remove or add.
I'm gonna suggest when it comes up that we do first reading this evening and not second and third, and bring it back at the February 19th meeting for second and third with the changes. So I've already advised council of that.
And Mr. Mayor, the wording will be providing at that time, or
I think
when do we know
this will be
it?
a separate item, and when we put on the table for amendments, Councilor Lorrain will be able to put amendments to the wording he wants. He's just letting us know a little bit ahead of time, and then the actual amendment will come later, correct?
I could send this all at a different time as well, because I'm requesting that we only do first reading tonight. We can pass it under first reading as is, but I want to see the changes in the second one, if
Okay.
council approves.
Monsieur Leduc?
Yeah, my question was only to ask clearly what was to be amended in the first paragraph. That was my only question.
Mhm.
Great.
So you said to replace which
It's,
words?
it's to remove and act in compliance with,
Okay.
because the clerk isn't the one who's going to police. So maybe you have to still tweak it a bit, but I'm just pointing out that the clerk isn't the one policing it.
Yep.
So secondly, under reporting allegations, if the clerk is responsible, should yeah, and that will change under the reportings for the clerk, because my comment was if the clerk was responsible in number 1, then wouldn't it be the clerk's default under number 2. So that way there, you remove any potential liability against the clerk for having not done their job in policing and making sure that the council acts in accordance or in compliance with the bylaw. So, just need to
Mr. Riddick?
make sure on that.
So to be clear, you're saying that the clerk should not be reporting to the CAO, just strictly as responsible of.
To take it over and hand it to you and to the,
Yeah.
and to the integrity commissioner.
To remove it.
Correct. Under the reprimand section, just go and find it now. Oh, sorry, it's still under there, sorry, I apologize. So, it talks here in paragraph, and I apologize, it's on page 4 of the report, right there. So, members of council, it says, are expected to adhere to provisions of the Code of Conduct. The Municipal Act 2001 authorizes council, where it has received a report by its integrity officer, that in his or her option, there have been a violation of the Code of Conduct, to impose one of the following sanctions, yet it says a reprimand and suspension of, so that would be both. The question, right? Am I reading that incorrectly?
That's right.
I guess, what's the definition of reprimand if it's not what's listed underneath?
Well, was my next point.
I think at this point, Mr. Lorenz raising the issue should be and or, so therefore it'd be one or the other, depending on the decision of the integrity commissioner.
That's point 1. And then the second one is, what's the definition of a reprimand? Like, I have no, what does reprimand mean? Right? What's the criteria for the integrity commissioner to impose a 1 week's pay versus 3 months' pay? Like, I have no idea.
Mr. Riddick?
I believe the integrity commissioner will not be imposing anything, he'll be reporting to council.
Making
And
recommendations.
then council is the really the one making the decision regarding any action to be taken following the report. So there may be none, or there might be a letter of excuse or public excuse, or it may be nothing, or it may be a suspension as per what the policy says here. But it would be only recommended to council, and council make a decision.
But it says he or she imposes. It doesn't say will recommend to council a suspension or a reprimand. It says will impose. So if that's not the case, then that needs to be changed. I'd like to see criteria as to what they're gonna look at to determine what's an offense that is 1 day's pay, 1 week's pay, or 90 days pay.
Could you just base it, it's for Maddie's, I'm trying to find the word that says the word oppose on.
Oh, it's right there. To
Opinion?
impose one of those.
Oh, to impose one of the following. It has received a report by the integrity commissioner that in his or her opinion, there has been a violation of the code of conduct to impose one of the following sanctions. So just word it that council may choose to impose.
It's council there.
It's council that makes the decision. Councilor Tarnowski?
So therefore, it's not imposed, but recommend to council or something like that.
Right. Monsieur Leduc?
Well, beginning of the sentence says that the municipal act says that authorizes council. So then it says the council to impose one of the following sanctions. So it's council who's imposing anything here.
It's not the integrity commissioner itself. He's recommending, it has received a report by its integrity commissioner.
And again, what's the criteria being used? What's the definition of reprimand? What's the criteria being used to determine the severity, in their opinion, of what the suspension should be?
Mr. Leduc, I'm not sure if they've provided that much detail while they created this integrity commission.
Yeah, we're in new territory right now, as you may know, and it causes some questioning. And I'm valid. I don't have that definition set up. I don't think I've ever seen that yet. I'll have to look for it, if anything there.
And the reason being is I can't vote on a code of conduct that I don't know what the what the consequences are of not adhering to something. Tells me what they could be, but it doesn't tell me what they are. My next point is on the next point down, the Integrity Commissioner recommendation. What is the outcome if the council members don't comply? Like, can they, like, what are the consequences of somebody not adhering to this? Does the Integrity Commissioner have the authority to kick a member off council?
I don't believe so.
So,
It's similar to ombudsman, if you will. Since you did.
I think this is council's giving itself an authority to do to intervene here. So I think when you ask me the definition of reprimand, I think I'll be returning the question to council. It's your policy, and what do you consider to be a reprimand, and to what extent are you willing to allow yourselves to decide? At this point, it's very general in nature, and maybe you wish to keep it like that, or you wish to be quite specific to your own definition of reprimand, because for us, maybe something, but this is council policing itself, so therefore, are you willing at this point to give us directions to what's your definition, or you want me to look for more definitions, but March 1st is coming also.
Yeah, so my understanding is that it talks about suspension of remuneration paid for up to 90 days. That's specifically in the, that's the way it's worded in the Municipal Act, is that correct? Je m'en rappelle bien, that's, the 90 days came from the new changes to the Municipal Act. I don't think that's an arbitrary number where we can say 365 days or 5 months or 6 months. I think they limit it to 90 days, and it's like you mentioned, Mr. Leduc, it's up to council in that particular situation to determine how it wants to police itself. What kind of Integrity Commissioner will make a recommendation, but at the end of the day, council will have the final say what it imposes. And there's some examples there, whether council decides to do any of them or not, any of them. Monsieur Leduc?
If 90 days is not the proper number, if the act is quite clear, we would change it back to what the act says, but I don't think we went further than the act, so I'm gonna have to validate that.
Okay.
So these, the items below, because it says may also recommend, I would have assumed then that those were the reprimands, but yet there's still reprimand up top. So I'm still very confused as to the wording of this and how this will be reviewed, implemented, and brought to council. And I know it's new, but again, we're asking me to sign off on a code of conduct that I don't have answers to.
Okay. Monsieur
So-
Leduc? So maybe si tu montes un petit peu plus haut. Maybe it's just taking that section, the Integrity Commissioner, in between the two. They could all be one.
Well, because
He's recommending those, right?
but look below. This paragraph here, I think, needs to be taken out in its entirety. The one underneath, removal as chair of a committee, the Integrity Commissioner has the final authority to recommend any of the sanctions above or other remedial actions at his or her discretion. What are those remedial actions at his or her that she's gonna have discretion, he or she's gonna have discretion over?
But to recommend to council.
Right, but what are those remedial actions? Is there a definition of remedial action in this document?
Monsieur Leduc?
Let's say council had a uniform policy, and one member would not be wearing the uniform policy. So one recommendation could be that the member not following uniform policy of council, that this person doesn't sit until he comes in with the uniform, properly decided by council. So that would be just an example of, if you ask me where it goes, well, it can go anywhere really. To see any policies you may have, the person may just force you to abide by policies. So that would be an example.
I think there needs to be clear definitions of what remedial actions could be within the policy before I can sign off on a policy. Any other comment on that one, because I got more.
Anything? No? Monsieur Leduc?
So in labor relations, which is managing staff, arbitrators or even management, some lines always say disciplinary measures up to dismissal. Nowhere are we as clear or as precise as this, and maybe this is the way that council should be entertaining, to be just vague and without anything specific, therefore not limiting anything, or therefore not being specific with anything. But sometimes in liberal relations, we're just as general to say, leading up to potential dismissal.
In this case,
It wouldn't be happening for council dismissal.
yeah,
It doesn't apply to council.
right.
But I'm saying it's just a broad statement instead of being quite specific to what could happen.
Okay, because honestly, the only, if I remember my municipal act properly, the only person who can take a member of council out of council is a judge. So that, Councillor Tarnowski?
So in putting this together, we obviously went and looked at other townships that have similar policies, is that correct?
Madame Camille Laflamme?
Yes, correct. It's based mostly from the one from the counties and also from others, and we added some also as well.
Okay, and so I understand that this is kind of a unique position because we can't use standard staffing procedures, but I would agree with Mr. Leduc that most of the time they show kind of the end result of how far it could escalate. And typically we would have a process of escalation, so first verbal warning and so on. So maybe that's what's missing there is the process to that escalation to that whatever 90-day, up to 90-day without pay or something like that. Maybe that's what's missing there is an escalation. I'm not sure what else you could put there.
Correct. Correct sur ce point-là, Monsieur Leduc?
Well, we have only one more shot at this next meeting in February, so for me, it's still, I can bring you both options, and either you can come up with a third one on February 19th, but certainly I can look at being quite specific or just be very vague. I'll bring you two options and you can vote on that.
As mentioned earlier, this is new territory for everybody, so, but we'll try and get it as close as possible. Conseiller Lorrain?
Right, but understand that if we're policing ourselves, and we've seen it in other municipalities where a certain member of the council is not liked by the majority of council, this could cause significant damage to that one person. So that's what we have to make sure we understand what we're doing here. And without policing our policing, we're allowing for a wide myriad of things to occur at this table amongst the people that are sitting here against themselves. So I think we have to make sure that we're implementing something that makes sense, that has clear direction, and unfortunately this doesn't have clear direction in my opinion at this point.
Mr. Leduc, once this is accepted and we go through 1 year, 2 year, 3, and we have a little bit more experience in situations, this policy is able to be amended as need be by a council's discretion?
My understanding is a policy like any other policy, so council has any time can remove or add or amend this policy.
Okay. Councilor Associate?
Well, we have an employee code of conduct report, so have we kind of mirrored that?
So my own say somewhat. We did some of it. We introduced some of the staff code of conduct into this, but we couldn't go as far because something were quite specific to staff. So that's why we removed what did not apply to council, and I'm trying to keep it as to what we felt was applicable to council, I should say.
And just for information purposes, for those that are watching might not know, so the provincial government has set a deadline that we must have these policies in place by March 1st of this year. That's correct. And this was implemented last year sometime, or last couple of years, giving us this notice, correct? Councilor Lorrain?
Yeah, one point of clarification under section 3, meetings, conferences, seminars, and delegations. Just further down. On my thing, it's page 8. Or sorry, page 9. So go down one more, please. Right there, thank you. So if there are members of council going to a conference, this is saying that no more than majority of council can ride on the same bus, train, or plane? Like, is that new?
Monsieur Leduc?
That's us making that recommendation to council for two reasons. For one thing, council is a council of 5, not 10 or 11 or 7. So therefore, we're quick to create a quorum in a car of 4. So there was one concern about creating quorum and advancing business outside the township. Second thing, for business continuity, we felt that if 3 or 4 members of council are all going on a plane and the plane goes down and the 4 of you are out, then this township is left with only one person to run the township. So therefore, we recommend the council to consider that only a number go to those different conferences. That's our position.
That travel together to go to the conference.
Yeah, exactly. You can go to different planes, you can go to different trains, you can to different cars.
I mean, this is done by all other municipalities, especially small municipalities, when they're trying to share costs of getting down there to different conferences. I mean, I can go for a coffee with members of council next door and sit there and we're not advancing the business. I don't see why it needs to be in a code of conduct that we have to travel in. I mean, I understand when you're talking, high-ranking CEOs and CFOs of major corporations, they fly in different vehicles for that reason, but members of council to go to Toronto or to Calgary or somewhere like that on the same plane doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be beside each other and going to be advancing business. So I find it a little ridiculous in my opinion.
Mr. Leduc?
Well, again, it's all a matter of transparency and a matter of being not advancing township business, and this is where the government's going, to be clear as to what the council can do and cannot do and refrain from. And I felt that an election running, cost of an election for having more than council disappear is worth putting into words on a policy. That's my position. But you can certainly vote against it.
I think as well as we've all heard stories that, there's 3 or 4 members of council sitting at the Tim Hortons after a meeting, and that's really where all the decisions were being made. I think, as you mentioned, it's transparency. We want to be able, to be as open, as transparent as possible, and the perception that, we're trying to eliminate those opportunities for backroom decisions to be made I'm fine with it. I think, chances are most events we're not driving to. If it's conference or something, we're flying, we're taking a train. We're not driving 4 of us in the car, not that I've seen in my term, so, but that's.
But this is saying you can't even have 3 people get on the same plane.
Okay. Monsieur Leduc?
No, we're talking about policy and words, and there's a difference between shall and should. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. And this says, should attend the same time. Okay, so it's a recommendation, but it's not written in stone, the way it's worded currently. Am I correct, Mr. Leduc?
Well, if should doesn't eliminate the fact that it can happen, then fine. My next item is under section 8, communication. Over there?
Yep.
So, let me ask why the clerk and the CEO shall be copied, shall, not should, shall be copied on any email sent and or exchanged to every council member as a group.
Monsieur Leduc?
Again, if I'm not copied, I'll be talking about myself. If I'm not copied on an email sent to all council altogether, I will never be able to confirm there was business being advanced through emails. If I'm copied on it, I certainly will intervene to city council members to warn you, if you continue, you're advancing the business of township and you could be subject for inquiries. And also, council members are not to direct staff directly, unless it's a council direction.
I'm
That's
not
why-
there, I'm not there yet.
Okay. So that's basically with, regarding copying council members, the same thing for the clerk. So if the clerk is not aware and she's the one responsible of this and we're being bypassed, we can't ensure. So for example, for us, it'd be a matter of adding either the clerk and my name or the clerk or my name, depending on council's decision, on the distribution list. So whereas you say council members, then the clerk automatically pops up in the distribution list.
Well,
Okay. I've even seen municipalities take it one step further. I believe it's Thousand Islands and Grenville, Thousand Islands, where any email that is the group of members of council is automatically put as correspondence into the agenda for the public to see, because there's a conversation happening between 5 members of council, and essentially we fall in territory where it could be considered quorum. So there are municipalities being proactive to say, you know, they're laying it out all in the public, but I understand the thought process behind it.
so what if I'm making a comment to council members about the clerk and the CAO? So I'm gonna
Monsieur
send a
Leduc?
note to them.
I would say you're advancing the business township.
I'm not asking for direction, I'm not asking for opinion, I'm stating a fact. I would like something put on the agenda on Monday night to deal specifically with the CAO.
So then you would.
Why would I copy the CAO?
You would send it to the mayor, and the mayor can put it.
That's
on the
not what this
agenda,
policy says.
right?
This policy says anything that I'm gonna send to council members, so the council members are aware that I wanna speak.
So if
Yes.
you want it on the agenda, you can send the request to the position of the mayor. The mayor makes sure it's on the agenda. You don't have to send it to all the members of council. It'll be on the agenda and can be discussed as a council.
Okay, I disagree that I should have to copy the CAO and the clerk on anything that I copy to all members of council. Plain and simple. I may, and more probably 99% of the time I do, include Monsieur Leduc in communications, and sometimes the clerk. But there are times where I wouldn't involve them. So, and it's not advanced, and I'm not trying to advance the business of the township at that point in time. But there may be things that the CEO and the clerk don't necessarily need to know.
Right? Comments from members of council on this one? Councilor Kanoski?
If I may, I just don't see the rationale for, if all of us are included on the email, the confidentiality requirement there, where we wouldn't want to copy at least one of them. If it has something to do completely outside of township business, then perhaps, but I really don't know. I don't see an example. I can't figure out an example where that doesn't advance township business somehow. And that's the transparency piece. So, you know, I have no problem when we email each other individually, perhaps. But as soon as we have the whole group, I think it's fair to have an outside eye looking in.
So what's the definition of advancing the business?
Monsieur Leduc?
Well, at the time you're asking your colleagues to say, I'm bringing this, I intend to contest this, I'm thinking of this new rate, I'm thinking of firing somebody, I'm thinking of changing a policy, it's all advancing business. Or I spoke to a developer and I'm wishing to bring this on his behalf. Again, it's an advancing business of township. So, and some of the townships have been as far as to say that an email, if it's all sent to everybody, it's considered to be a meeting of council. Because you are advancing the township, the business township.
Then why do we have a general delivery email box for all members of council?
That's a good question, and that's why we're reviewing this practice.
Okay, next item.
I'll just make a comment as well, is that on there we have, the ombudsman put out a open meetings guide for municipalities. And in that reference, he makes reference, let me just put it in here. Any exchange wherein council votes, reaches consensus, provides direction or input to staff, or discusses or debates a proposal of course of action, or strategically should be reserved for official meetings of council, local board, or committee. In another part, I should have highlighted that as well. He mentions of laying the groundwork for what's going to be a conversation at the council table as well. So I think that's, again, it comes back to transparency.
Next item.
Yep.
So further down in there, it says, members of council will attempt to accurately and adequately communicate the attitudes and decisions of council, even if they disagree with the majority decision of council, so that there is respect for the decision-making process of council. Official information related to decisions and resolutions made by council will normally be communicated in the first instance to the community and the media in an official capacity by the mayor or CAO or designate. And the mayor shall be the official spokesperson for the township. If the mayor is not available, then the CAO shall assume that role. So a couple of questions on that. So are you saying that if I disagree with something that is approved at council and a member of the media asks me for my opinion on that, I'm not allowed to share my opinion?
Mr.
Isn't that kind of stifling me?
Mr. Dudzik?
I think the first line could be an answer. There is respect for the decision-making process of council. If you're sharing your own personal view, it's one thing. If you're contesting democracy and process of council, then you might be subject to be questioned.
So council voted this way, however, I disagree with that.
Yeah.
And here's why.
I think personally, I think that's not an issue at all.
I just want to make sure I understand it correctly, because I could interpret that in many different ways, whereas this is saying that I cannot speak my mind to anybody, whether it be media, members of the public, on a decision that was made that I didn't agree with. So, just want to make sure that that's out there.
No, as long, I think we're saying, I think it's, as long as you're stating a personal opinion and not trying to, making it clear that you're not representing council's decision.
Yeah.
I think that's
And I think that was done when you were away, and I did respond to members of the public. I said this was a decision of council, and actually left out the fact I voted against the item that was there. So the last one, the mayor shall be the official spokesperson for the township. The mayor is not, available, then the CAO shall assume that role. Wouldn't that be the deputy mayor or the acting person?
Monsieur Leduc?
Different scenarios can happen. Certainly under emergency measures, if the acting mayor is not there, then the deputy mayor can certainly come in. Sometimes it'd be a matter of having we have occasionally visits from newspapers or TV crews come in, ask for the mayor, are looking for a response about something, and they're needing it in 10 minutes. They're in the office in 10 minutes. In those situations, you need somebody on behalf of township to respond to what's out there. So that would allow me to do so if I feel that I can say something positive about it, or I can say something that matters to that I can bring to the community. If it's something that's really political, I would stay away from that. But certainly that would allow me to respond to some of these interview requests that we get.
So then shouldn't that read, then is not available, then the acting mayor or deputy mayor, whatever you want to call it, and or CAO shall assume that role?
I think it's fine.
Okay. Number 9, media and public relations. So I'm assuming that if somebody breaches this, it falls back up to the top where we talk about the integrity commissioner? Is that how this is? I'm just trying to understand the consequences, because it doesn't give consequences here. It just says you need to abide by this. So what is the consequence of not abiding by it?
I think everything relates back to the integrity commissioner, Mr. Leduc.
Okay.
Madame Camille Laflamme.
If I can add, I looked for the reprimand in the 90 days that we mentioned before. So yes, so it's in there under the municipal act under inquiry by commissioner, and it's the penalties, and it says a reprimand, and then it's the suspension, blah, 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 for up to 90 days. That's what's in the municipal act, that way. There's not the and there's not the or.
So it's, we just copied essentially what was written in the municipal act.
Yes.
Even if the province was clearer sometimes.
Well, shouldn't we be clearer then? Since we're imposing this on ourselves,
Yep.
shouldn't we be clear about what a reprimand is and what consequences are and what discretion that the integrity commissioner will have?
Councilor Tanasi?
I would be cautious in that direction, because the more words you put in, the more kind of specific you become, and then the more limiting the ability to do that. And maybe that's what you're looking for. But if the municipal act already has it, and I think it could always be argued why we're using it, because it's already being used. I'm just cautious that if we start adding more words in there, that we may kind of box ourselves into, or limit ourselves, which is maybe that's the reasoning behind it, I'm not sure.
I'll say better.
In my opinion, is we should be limiting us. We should be limiting ourselves. We shouldn't have a blank check to be able to reprimand other members of council. Like, we're giving the ability to the integrity commissioner to come in and make recommendations, but we're also now saying that this council can override what the integrity commissioner says and impose anything. Well, at what discretion should council have to be able to do that, right? The integrity commissioner come in and say, we recommend that it's 2 weeks' pay be taken off of Councilor Lauren for whatever thing that they deem to have been done, and the rest of council can sit up here and go, nope, 3 months. Well, what criteria did you look at? What are you basing it on? If we have no criteria, no basis of that, it makes no sense. You're allowing yourselves carte blanche to do whatever you want to each other.
Councilor Tanasi?
I think in a way you're kind of answering your own question, because if there is an integrity commissioner that goes through a process and comes with a recommendation, then goes through a second level process, if you want, where it's the council. So you really have like two kind of buffers, if you want, to ensure that a proper decision is made and there's no abuse of power and so on. So I think in a way, it's not carte blanche, it's not a blank check as you're saying it. I think it's to the other side of things. There's going to be there's accountability there, and I think in terms of the spirit of a process like this, it's really to ensure that we are accountable. So the more we kind of limit that accountability, the more it makes this process kind of useless, really. So it's just an opinion, but I think with the integrity commissioner and the council involved, I think it adds a level of protection, adds a level of accountability. I like it.
I think I'll just comment on there. I understand your thought process that council can all of a sudden, but I would find that if an integrity commissioner is recommending 2 weeks and a council decides to go 3 months, there's what's the justification in that case?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Where's the justification? And
But we can't, as a council, we can't put in a policy every possible scenario to say, oh, this is a week, this is 2 weeks, this is 3 weeks, this is 4 weeks. I think, again, it's new ground. I think if the integrity commissioner would be recommending something, in my opinion, I would be relying on him personally to see what kind of recommendation he does, and
But we're implementing something here that's going to supersede this council. It's going to continue on going forward. There may be councils that don't get along.
right?
And this opens that door for them, and we can't just think of this council. We got to think of future councils and future people that come in, and I'm going to suggest that anyone who applies to run in an election be given copies of all of this information
Yep.
before they decide to put their name on the dotted line, because there's a lot of things that people aren't aware of when they put their name on the dotted line when they come into councils. So we have to be very careful in terms of what we're giving. And I understand there's two, the level of the Integrity Commission, then council comes in, but we talk about a process. What is the process? What are they gonna do? How are they gonna investigate? What are they going to take into account? We don't know. That's not clear. So that's where I have a problem with it right now. So.
Oh, I think as Monsieur Leduc.
So I'm just gonna say, if I hear correctly, Mr. Lorrain, you're kind of looking for something that would say that council can impose a higher level of discipline than what the report says. Is that kind of what you're hinting?
I'm concerned that council will do that.
So you would like to say something that, council can't impose further disciplinary measures?
Well, I think there needs to be something else in the bylaw that allows the person who's being brought up on these alleged allegations, that is there an appeal process that allows them to speak their mind after council imposes whatever fines. There's nothing in here for an appeal, right? If they find that it's over the top, who do they go to?
And I think as well, if I remember well, when this is presented to council, the member in question is able to participate in the meeting. I'll double check, Madame Camille Laflamme. I'm pretty sure that a member of council is allowed to sit in the meeting and voice his opinion and defend himself in this case.
Which is fine,
Yeah.
but even at that point, like I mentioned, the
So-
point that I brought up, and I'll use me as an example, if the other four members here have something out for me, you can impose whatever you want, even outside of what the Integrity Commissioner requested or recommended. I can't appeal that to anybody. I can't go to an Integrity Commissioner for it. I can't go to the Ombudsman. I can't, who do I, in this circumstance, who would I go to appeal it if I don't agree with what council has imposed?
So, Councillor Tarnowski?
If I can draw a parallel, everything that we do here in terms of council business and working with the administration already reflects exactly what this is proposing. So administration comes up with a recommendation based on their area of expertise. We discuss it and we vote on it whether we're going to accept it or not. If you disagree with something that administration brought forward, but the majority of council agrees on it, the matter is voted on and it's moved on. It's really the same process.
I disagree.
If you, again, the same concept, is there a way for me, let's say there's a recommendation and I disagree with the recommendation and council votes in favor of this recommendation, is there a way for me to appeal that currently?
There is
a motion to reconsider, which council votes on it again. Do we want to hear it again? No.
Or you bring another member, or you get a member of council on the winning side to bring it back to the table afterwards. So there are other options, but this is council policing themselves. This isn't a report from staff. This is a report from the Integrity Commissioner, right? And then council can make whatever decision they want.
So
they don't have to abide by it. So who does that member go to?
So would you like to see something along the lines, sort of like Monsieur Leduc saying that council will not go above and beyond the recommendation of the Integrity Commission? So the Integrity Commissioner could come in at 3 months, but council can say, we're okay with 2 weeks. But if he comes in at 2 weeks, we can't say 3 months.
I think that's a start, but again, if the Integrity Commissioner comes in and finds that there was a breach, how does that person appeal that? Even before council gets to make a decision on the ramifications. Like in everything, when there's a penalty, there's an appeal period. There's an appeal process.
So, Madame Camille Laflamme, we'll look at the Municipal Act and see if there's a clause in there. I don't remember. I think it said Madame Camille Laflamme?
There's a piece, I haven't read the whole thing about appeal process, but there's a power on inquiry and then you can go for a public meeting. But we can check specifically for the
Okay.
appeal process.
Councilor
Oh, sorry.
Sosa?
Yeah, just on that, I agree with Councillor Laurent on that, just because like in any, employment area, if you get an appraisal and you don't agree with something, you have a right to put it in writing and forward that, so I would suggest maybe, you know, if it could be put in writing and something like that, that would be on your file and that you disagree with what was said.
So moving on to the Schedule A to Council Code of Conduct breach form. It's the next
That's on
item.
your document page.
Okay. So can you scroll down just a little bit and then make it bigger with all those items? Thank you. So I'm assuming, based on this, that one member of council could put in a request to have the integrity commissioner review something on another member of council. Is that correct?
I believe so, Monsieur.
Based on this?
This and any member of the public, correct?
Yeah, I think, you're right, Mr. Mayor, yourselves are the public.
Okay. I just wanted to confirm that a member of council, based on this, could submit, based on this document, a code of conduct related issue. That's accurate. So,
Similarly to where a complaint to the ombudsman office could come from a member of council correctly as well.
absolutely. Is there protection in the insurance of the corporation of the Township of Russell for any lawsuits that come out? And I'm gonna talk specifically to the third item in conflict of interest. So if somebody puts it on this document that they feel that somebody else was in conflict and did not declare, and we all know that it's up to the member to declare, and that you should never, ever be accusing another member of council of being in conflict without fear of reprimand because of, what's it called, defamation? Yeah, defamation of character type of a situation. Will this code of conduct protect that member of council? Because right now you're telling me that I can.
I think currently the Conflict of Interest Act, a member of council could submit to the courts if he found or she found.
Absolutely,
that
they can go to the
somebody was-
courts,
Yes.
but this is outside the courts. This is our own process. I'm just asking, because if I accuse another member of council sitting here tonight of something on the agenda and I said, you're in conflict, you could then sue me personally for defamation because you don't agree that I'm in conflict, because I could be defaming your character for having not declared a conflict.
So just to be clear, are you talking about publicly declaring it or filling out this form and going to the Integrity Commission?
I'm talking filling out this form because,
So this form, Monsieur Leduc, correct me if I'm wrong, this form is submitted to the administration who provided to the Integrity Commissioner. The whole process is not a public process. The Integrity Commissioner would investigate and then make his recommendation. And I think in the Municipal Act, the Conflict of Interest, Conflict of Interest Act as well, the Integrity Commissioner, if they find that somebody was in a conflict of interest, they have the right to apply to the court without going through council.
okay? So my question is a member of council protected? If it gets out that they accuse another member of council on this form?
Monsieur Leduc?
I don't know the answer, so I'll have to validate that.
Thank you. Now I think I need to go to the council and staff bylaw.
Okay, so at this point in time, we'll come back, just take a 10-minute
Sure.
break. So we'll come back at 8 o'clock.
Il y a des terrains qu'on a nettoyés la semaine passée. Ils sont jeunes. C'est pas-
Bonsoir tout le monde, welcome back everyone. We'll continue with our code of conduct and staff relation, council staff relation policy. Councilor Lorrain.
Thank you very much. So, like I said, I'd like to open the council staff relations policy and start right at the top. Okay, right there. So, my first question is this a code of, is this a policy that's mandated under the Municipal Act, or is this just something that that staff wants?
Monsieur Le Duc.
Mr. Mayor, Conseil, no, this is a policy that the ministry has imposed on us for March 1st.
Okay, can we get rid of the word wishes then, in the fourth sentence?
Certainly.
Great.
Because it makes it seem like it's you that wants it. So that was just one point of clarification. The second point, I believe, if I wrote these properly, 5.1, and I believe it's H, that I'd like to discuss. So 5.1H, 5.1 is members of council are expected to, and we narrate is there, respect the chain of command set out in approved organizational charts, and copy and or inform the CAO and mayor when emailing or texting to or calling directly department heads on any request they may seek from staff. I think we need more clarification on this, and I'll make additional comments after that.
Monsieur Le Duc.
Well, this starts with what can council do, or individual council members can do also or not. So, council can give direction. Councilors cannot go out and give directions to staff. Now, any request, meaning that you're requesting somebody to do something for you. For example, if you're asking for information, I'm not asking to be text or copied. If you're asking for somebody to go and repair this pothole, go and do this, go and do that, spend this money, and have any request like that, then it should be going through the org chart, which is the director of the department. If it's to them, then I should be informed if council is asking, if any council members are asking for something specific that we do. Just again, just a matter of really be clearing on the role of council, and this is why the province is putting this into place, whereas there's been all kinds of interference and councilors giving direction to staff where it's caused conflict between staff and the CEO or staff and council.
So just to clarify, when you reference councilors, you reference the mayor as well, is that no individual member of council has the ability to give direction. The mayor as CEO has different responsibilities than individual members of council, but individual councilors don't have a role in the Municipal Act, only as part of council. Correct?
That's correct.
I have a couple issues with this, and I'll explain them now. I have absolutely no issue copying the CEO, which I believe on 99% of the time, if I'm sending an email to a department head, and normally I would only contact the department head for questions that I have, and I would copy the CAO on that, and chances are I would copy most members of council on that as well. That I don't have an issue with. However, I do have an issue with being told that I have to copy the mayor on every one of my emails to staff, to department heads. I mean, council members don't report to the mayor.
That's correct.
So why do I need to copy the mayor on my emails to staff?
Personally, I'm fine with removing it. Monsieur Le Duc.
Again, it's a council policy, so you get to vote what you strike and what you add to it.
Okay.
Secondly, the other piece of this is, am I adding the CAO's phone number for, in every texting chat that I have with any members of staff? Because that's what it's asking me to do.
Monsieur Leduc?
If it's a personal chat, I don't need to be part of that discussion. If it's a requesting something, or complaining about something, or wishing any changes, then yes, the CO should be, and it should be done during the day, so therefore, it's through an email, through a meeting, or whatever. Yes, I'm asking that to take place.
Because just to confirm, the way council has one employee, and that's the administrator, that's the CEO, is that correct? So therefore, everything should be going through the CAO. As Monsieur Leduc mentioned, if it's, you're asking a question, him being simply copied on it, but if, that's fine, but if you're asking direction or you know, I think the whole point of what the province is trying to do is trying to put clear boundaries as to what the role of council is and what the role of the administration is.
Okay, but what if I have to talk to, I'll use a name, I'll name one of the people because it's the person that we would deal with. I have to either call or email Caroline Menal because there's something wrong with my pay.
So, Monsieur Leduc, that's not advancing the business of the corporation,
But it
that's on a personal matter.
Doesn't say that here though.
No.
If you're calling her to inform, to request details as to how come your paycheck is this or that, that's one thing. If you tell her, I want you to correct this because you think it's a mistake, maybe there's no mistakes, and maybe she doesn't have to do it, but then under political pressure, she goes out and corrects a bank, a vacation, or she corrects a wage or an hour or whatever. So in that particular case, there's, depending on the question.
Then we need to change the verbiage here, because right now, this doesn't speak to council, township business, it doesn't speak to advancing business, it doesn't speak to the types of requests. This just says, copy you and the mayor on everything. Text, emails, and phone calls. I mean, are we doing conference calling? Are we doing three-way calling? I just want to make sure that it's clear, because that's what you're asking for in this. Is that every time that somebody wants to reach out, that we set up a conference call or a three-way call.
Monsieur Leduc?
Well, I guess, again, if it's an information question, that's one thing. If you're requesting something, it should probably go through my office to see if should there be a meeting, should there be a discussion taking place. So again, I can certainly work on clarifying the request.
I think it needs to be clarified, because I'll use the example of the agenda. I have questions on the agenda. I'm gonna run everything through you for 3 days, so that I can't speak to the department heads and get clarification, right? That's what this is saying. And I think you're way too busy for you to be inundated with all these emails, text messages, or phone calls. That's just my opinion.
Councillor Tarnowski?
But I think the fact that they're just a carbon copy, like so you're in the loop, so Mr. Leduc is in the loop, I don't think that impacts workflow so much. I mean, that could be put through the email process where they're all set aside as CCs kind of thing.
But that's good for emails. But how do you do that with a text message or a phone call? Right.
I think there's a section in here as well that this should be done during business hours, correct? This shouldn't be outside of normal business hours.
That's correct.
If there's an emergency outside of business hours, it would be to you, Monsieur Leduc, we go to, and then you would decide how you handle that situation.
Like every emergency measures, there's an order of people to call. So that'd be the one, and then if not myself, you can reach me, we'll be going directly to the director. If you can't reach them, they go to their supervisor. So there'll be a process there to call, but like any time we have emergencies.
Yeah, I just hope that your office, Mr. Leduc, has lots of room, because some members of council may have jobs that they do throughout the day, and everything they do is gonna be outside of business hours. So I'm just hoping that then you'll be forwarding these on, and that the questions are gonna be responded to in a timely manner by staff when we need our answers in those circumstances, so that's all I'm saying.
Just to, in regards to timely manner, I believe this makes reference to the existing communication policy saying 2 days, 48-hour response. Go ahead.
Okay. If we go down to monitoring contraventions, and I know I've been rambling for about an hour and a half now, but I apologize.
Section is that?
Monitoring and contraventions. It's further down.
Like,
I don't think there's a number associated with it.
It starts on page 5.
Yeah, there it is.
There.
Okay. So, we talk about there's formal complaints and informal complaints. So on a formal complaint, what are the disciplinary actions that could be taking place here, since they're not outlined? So that's a concern.
So it makes reference in the case of council, this would similarly go to the integrity commissioner.
It depends. I mean, we only have $15,000 for budget for these.
Integrity
Commissioner.
commissioner.
So hoping that sometimes there's conflicts and sometimes there's some smaller issues to resolve. Hoping that informal issues are being raised so we can resolve them before going through a formal process of complaint investigation by integrity commissioner. So that's why there's two processes here, so we can resolve the issues prior to going forward. But you're right, there's no disciplinary measures outlined there in the policy, and so if it's to reflect whatever the other one's saying, it could be similar in this case. But
Yeah, makes similar.
I think it needs to make reference to it. The second piece, under the informal. So it says here, upon receipt of an informal complaint or concern, the clerk shall notify, in the case of officers, employees of the Township of Russell, their respective managers or directors, and chief administrative officer, number one, and then in number two, in the case of council, the mayor and chief administrative officer. So under number one, I assume in the case of officers, is that council?
known by the Act, it's probably the clerk and the treasurer, if you look at the word officers in the Act. And most likely it could be directors.
Upper
So
management.
it could be clarified, it could be removed. If you say all employees, it should be fine also.
Because that could be a lot of people. So
Yeah.
if an informal complaint or concern comes in, we're gonna notify, in the case of officers or employees of the township, their respect. Okay, so if it's against an officer and employee, they notify the respective manager or director and the CEO, CAO, correct? And then in the case of council, the mayor and chief administrative officer. So here's my thing here. If a member of council receives a complaint here, why does the mayor get notified?
Monsieur Leduc?
So we're in the informal process of resolution here, and in order to try to resolve it, I mean, same way as an employee may wish to have the CEO there to assist him or her in her process, it could be the same for the council member who wishes that the mayor be there also, who's used to deal with staff maybe more regularly with the CEO also. So there could be validity or utility to have that happen.
Is there not also advantage of having two members present during a discussion?
Well, certainly, always better to, in an informal process, to have not one against two, my word against your word, or two against one to say, no, I witnessed that, but you're on your own to witness what you said. So therefore, it's always better to be on a fair level of
So
discussion.
shouldn't there be a number 3 then? In the case of the mayor, council members and the CAO should be notified?
Acting mayor. If it's a complaint against the mayor, then the acting mayor and the chief administrative officer. Fine with that.
Okay.
And you know what? I think that is it until 17 for me.
Okay. Any other comments from members of council? Anything else on this subject from the administration? Vous avez pris bien des notes? Et ça va, this will come back in, well, it'll come back, and then we'll see if it gets deferred or not, but I'm assuming that,
Just to be clear, I'm not recommending to defer, I'll be recommending to pass first reading tonight, as is, and come back at the next meeting for second and third reading.
okay. Item 12 got moved to 14. Item 13, question period on meeting the day. So I'll ask anyone who has questions to please come up to the lectern and state your name and address.
Good evening, Mayor Charles Armstrong from Castlepool Street in Nimbrin. My first question has to in respect of item 11D. You have on the projects Heritage Castle Bow works in the water and sewage projects. Does that include Richelieu?
Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Bourgon?
True, Mr. Mayor, yes, it includes Richelieu.
Okay. And it includes an estimate. When was that estimate made? Is that the current estimate?
Monsieur Bourgon?
No, that was the estimate done prior to the design work being completed.
As a Class D estimate?
Monsieur Bourgon?
Yeah, now the design's done, so we have updated numbers.
Okay. I'm assuming we're going to get that in the near future.
Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Bourgon?
Yeah, that's right.
The next question has to the conflict of interest table here, and I'm looking at section 20 of the procedural bylaw.
Okay.
Okay.
You're looking at the chart from the
chart
procedural
from
bylaw?
there, section 20, and I realize that the actual conflict section on disclosure of interest, Article 20, in the existing bylaw starts off, at all times under all circumstances, members shall be guided by and have regard to Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. But in the table, it says shall reflect the Municipal Act or Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, Section 5, 5.1, etc., etc. Should it not also say subject to Section 4? Because Section 4 of the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act says if one of these circumstances apply, even though you may have a pecuniary interest, forget the rest.
Okay. Madame Camille-Laflamme?
Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure which section's 20 because we have none 20. It's 20.2, 20.3.
Yeah, but all of 20 talks about interest, pecuniary interest. But I'll quote the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, Section 4. Quote, Section 5 does not apply to a pecuniary interest in any matter that the member may have, and then lists a long series of exceptions. In other words, when you read through the rest of the act, it means skip reading the rest of the act because it doesn't apply. The way the bylaw is written, including in this table, it says you still have a pecuniary interest, you still have to make your reports, you still have to recuse yourself from discussions, et cetera, is that what was intended? Or was intended to simply say, after 4, if it applies in the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, skip the rest? That's not clear in the bylaw, and I'm asking if that's what was intended.
I don't have an answer for you. That's something we can look at, Madame Camille Laflamme.
I'm not still really sure of the question because we were referring to the sections in the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, and we were just clarifying what was already in the procedural bylaw.
Right, so what I would suggest in this case, if this is approved tonight, we will give notification that it will be reopened at our next meeting. You can send the information to the clerk and she can review that and if need be, include it in a chart as part of our package.
Okay. And the last one has to do with the, actually it was the Section 12 Notice of Motion. And I go down to the actual table, the examples that are given. And if there is a project cost of a certain amount and you give $1 million here, and one property owner wishes to participate, then that one property owner pays everything up front.
The way the notice of motion is written, yes.
Yes. Is it not proper that the township itself be a partner in this and the one property owner gets to pay their fair share, and then later on as others connect, the township just keeps everything?
Fortunately, I'll say in that situation, we have a debt capacity. Does the municipality wish to take on all that debt?
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps council doesn't wish that. If one property owner decides that he wants to invest and pay it, then so be it. He has that right. But as I stated before, the municipality, there is no advantage to the municipality for people to connect to the system at this point in time. On private services, if somebody wishes to stay on private services, the township is okay with that, unless council makes a decision to impose it on them. But that's sort of what the notice of motion is in saying, that we don't want to force anybody to connect that they don't want to.
Next thing, will this come out as a bylaw? Or just a policy?
At this point in time, it's a more of a policy. It's more of a guiding principles, if you will, that council, if they decide to accept this notice of motion, is setting it on themselves that these are the guiding principles they will follow. Council always has the right to have something presented to them and make another choice if they will. As they do with bylaws, they can make changes at any point in time.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, comments? Nope. Okay. We shall move on. That was item 13, question period on meeting a day. Item 14, resolutions. Motion that council approve all recommendations listed in the agenda under number 11, reports from departments and council committees. We need a mover and a seconder to put that on the table, and then we'll pull amendments. Moved by Conseiller Lorrain, seconded by Councillor Tenaski. Il y avait certaines sections qu'on voulait enlever, Madame Camille Laflamme. So the first one was the removal of parlock control.
11E for the,
Community grants,
yes.
just to change one word if I remember well. So if I, yeah, so if I need to remove that as a separate item, I need a mover and a seconder.
What about G and H? Are the resolutions as well?
No, they're bylaw. G and H, they bylaw. They,
What kind of resolution is it?
There's a resolution for H, yes.
To receive, H is the council receives a report dated February 4th and approves the proposed bylaw for council code of conduct and the proposed bylaw for council staff relations. But when we get to the bylaws, we can do
I'd like to take it
first
out.
reading. You want it separate as well?
Yeah, so I can't approve the resolution without, with anything for the bylaws, right?
So, Epiash, E and H, so I need a mover and a seconder to remove those two items. Moved by Councillor Lorrain, seconded by Councillor Sosi. All those favor removing those two items? All those opposed?
Hold on. G, H, and, C, E, right?
G,
E, G, and H?
you want G as well?
G has nothing, there's no
There's
resolution.
no resolution on that one?
No, it was just the
That's-
chart being brought back
Right.
and the bylaws by itself.
So it's getting it.
And the bylaws for code of conduct and council staff is also by itself.
Okay, so those three items, when we get to bylaws, will be separate items. Okay, so all those in favor except E and H? All those opposed? So those are carried, so now we will do E separately, which was the community grants. I need a mover and a seconder to put that on the table, moved by Conseiller Lorrain, seconded by Councillor Chinoski. Question, Councillor Lorrain?
I'm gonna make a motion to change the wording in each one of the first three items. And I'm gonna get exactly the wording here.
On peut s'amener le rapport à l'analyse.
No,
Is it in the report or just the motion?
It's in the, I
it's in the
think
report.
It's just making reference, the wording in the report would like, you would like to.
In the history, reference, and support information section of the report. So in each one of them, they have the same last sentence, basically, to raise funds for the future township aqua center. I would like that to read, to raise funds for a future aqua center.
For a future, and you want township scratch.
Township scratched it.
Okay. So that's moved by Conseiller Lorrain. Do I have a seconder to make that change? Councillor Saucier. All those in favor of the change? Question? Yeah, Councillor Kanaski?
So I just need clarification from Councilor Lorrain, why are we removing township? Will it not, like the way it's written there is that it just implies that it's in the township?
No, it implies, it's implying that there is a project that the township has approved already.
So perhaps could be to raise funds for a possible future township aquatic center. Because nothing's approved at this point in time. And if they're raising funds for a possible township aquatic center, would that be acceptable or?
That's fine. If you wanna go that way, then, as long as it says
It's clear that
a possible
future township.
future township aquatic center, then I'll be fine with that.
Are you okay with that, Councillor Associate?
As long as it's possible, yeah.
Possible. Okay, on est correct avec ça, Madame Camille Lapin? So then
Yes,
what's
so
it-
now the report in the history at number 1, 2, and 3 would be amended to say to raise funds for a possible future township aqua center.
Okay,
Is that correct?
that's correct. Everybody in favor? Everybody opposed? Approved. And now to approve as amended, all those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. So now we move on to item H. So the resolution reads that council receives report CL 05-2019 dated February 4th, 2019, and approves proposed bylaw for the council code of conduct and the proposed bylaw for the council staff relations policy. Need a mover and a seconder to put on the table. Moved by Conseiller Lorrain, seconded by Councillor Saucier. Questions, amendments?
Amendment,
Councillor Lorrain?
that we remove the word approves. 'Cause
That
I'm-
council receives report CL 05-2019 dated February 4th, 2019.
About.
We just, about the proposed bylaw for, change the word,
And the reason for this
Approves
is
instead
that,
of out.
like I stated, is when we get to the bylaws, I'm gonna ask that that they be read a first time only, so that it comes back, so we can't approve the resolution if we're not approving the bylaw.
Right.
So,
Okay. Got that?
that's the intention.
So that's moved by Conseiller Larin, seconded by Councillor Saucier. Questions? All those in favor? Against? The amendment is carried. To approve the recommendation itself as amended. All those for, against? Carried. So that ends the 14A, I guess, resolutions. Item B is the notice of motion, c'est ça, Madame Camille-Ladame? On a mis en dessous 14B.
Yes.
Peux-tu lire la notice of motion, s'il vous plaît?
So moved by Mayor Pierre Leroux, seconded by Councillor Mike Ternowski. The title was Notice Motion with respect to capital conversion principles. Whereas a capital charges bylaw was presented to council in June 2018, and whereas many residents voiced their wish to never connect to the municipal system, and whereas many residents have also voiced concerns of having to pay infrastructure costs associated with a project moving forward that they would not be connecting to, and whereas Councillor Ternowski and Mayor Leroux feel that having unwanted costs imposed on residents could cause undue hardships, therefore be it resolved that council adopt the guiding principles attached to this notice of motion, and furthermore be it resolved the township will not hold any specific amounts of units for existing properties as they are considered growth units.
So we have a mover and a seconder. Questions? Conseiller Larin
Yeah.
and Councillor Saucier.
Sorry, I got a couple of different things, but the first one that I have is, and this is more for the clerk, and this is just for procedural. Under procedure bylaw, section 8.12, if the mayor is moving a motion, should he not be recusing from the chair's position to debate or discuss?
Yes, that's correct.
So I will.
Just procedural, I just wanna make sure that we're
Oui.
following proper procedure.
C'est en dessous de 8.12, c'est ça?
I believe so.
Yes.
I had lots of time to read the entire procedure bylaw.
Yeah, eh? 8.12, chair participation, step down. If the chair desires to leave the chair for the purpose of debating or moving a motion, the chair shall designate another member of council such time the motion any such. I'm fine doing it, don't desire to, but that's fine, I have no issues moving.
I think if you're debating something.
I wasn't
you should-
debating anything at this point in
No,
time.
but you're also moving something.
Yeah.
And if we have questions on it, you're gonna debate it. So,
Yep.
that's my concern, and I'm not asking to
So
sit
in
there,
this-
I would suggest you put somebody else in the chair, cause I do wanna debate it.
So this puts us in an awkward position then, because if all members of council want to debate it, whoever's in the chair doesn't really matter, correct?
Correct, if all members of council are debating it.
I'll ask members of council who plans on debating
I have a question.
a question, so not necessarily a debate.
No, I wouldn't say so.
Okay, that
There you go.
then in that case, I'll invite Councillor Saucier to come sit in the chair.
Really?
Yes.
All right.
Don't say never do anything for you.
For my question?
Hey?
Just for my question?
No,
you're
for the
running.
discussion.
You're running this discussion at this point in time.
So why did I get voted?
You said you were debating it because the rest of us will probably debate it.
Okay.
Cause I could sit there, but I'm gonna have questions or debate the part of this
But I do
anyways.
have a question.
That's fine. Well, you can when we're done debating, you can ask.
Alright,
So ask for questions.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes, Councillor Laurent?
Okay. So, I understand the purpose of this, and I'd like to ask the members who put it forward on this. Are we not being a little premature with this without having had the report from staff yet on this? Because we're assuming right now, based on the last comment, or we're making the statement that any specific amounts or units for existing properties as they are considered growth units. Well, that we're not gonna hold any specific item. I don't think it's been shown yet to us in a report that they are growth units. So, and I believe that we're supposed to get a report in the coming weeks. So I would ask council to defer this item until that meeting so that we could see what the report says, have answers to our questions, and then debate this item and vote on it. You know, I think it's a great job that you guys did putting something together, but in my opinion, I think it's still a little premature. I think we need to see the results of what we asked staff to do before voting on it.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
I'm not running this.
Thank you, Councillor Laurent.
Thank you.
Okay, can I ask my question? Oh, Councillor Chernowski, you have a question?
Thank you, Councillor Sosi. I don't think that's that part there is essential to it. I think the idea behind it again is it also lays the groundwork in terms of the capital charges and where it's going to impact the capital charges in if this kind of process is in place. So I don't think I don't think that it has material difference if it's there or not. So I'm okay with it not being there and moving forward with it.
Councillor Laurent?
No, I think Mr. Mayor
Oh,
wants to say something.
Mr. Mayor.
I would be fine as well if we took out that little section at the end of furthermore.
Okay. And but see, the thing is, I would like to see the report first, because maybe it does belong there, right? I'm not saying take it out, I'm just saying it may not be accurate yet. So until we know for sure, should we be voting on this notice of motion yet? So I'm gonna ask, sorry, did we put this on the table? Yep. Is it moved and seconded?
Next move by it.
Yes.
Oh, you moved, okay, that's right. So I'm gonna ask that we defer it until the council meeting that we get the full report on the capital charges. And then we can have a reasonable debate on it, knowing all of the information. Because right now I don't have all the information, so it's tough to go ahead and approve guiding principles to something I don't know all the answers to yet.
Councillor Chernowski?
Thank you. So my only point, and I agree with your logic there, Councillor Laurent, but my only point is that by having something like this in place ahead of time, it kind of reduces the likelihood of the amount of people that would connect, which would have an impact on the capital charges, the whole process around the capital charges, alleviating the possible challenges of running, or requiring capital charges. So by having something like that in place as we move forward through the process, it kind of sets the tone and probably will give us a much better idea to my point, to my thoughts, the reasoning behind the capital charges, or with something like that with a lot less demand, it may have an impact on the requirements to have these capital charges for current residents hooking up.
Councillor Laurent?
So I'm glad you said it that way, because that was exactly my point at the last meeting, that we shouldn't be doing anything for people that will never connect. We should never be calculating them in the cost structures. And how do you do that? Ask them. I don't think it's that hard. I mean, we're talking about 600 residents, and that was my point then, and everyone looked at me like I had two heads. I'm like, go out and ask them. Do you foresee ever wanting to connect? Yes, no, okay, now we got the count. And then it says, these people are never going to want to connect. Regardless of cost, they're never going to want to connect. So then you take them out of the calculation, and it does exactly what this is doing. So I agree, we should be asking the question, and we should be doing all of our calculations on the people that will truly want to connect in the future at some point in time, that they think they want to connect. And then when that project goes to that area, they're gonna get all the information, and then they choose again, do I want to connect or don't I? Because we've done all the work, they've said yes, here we go, boom, there's all the information in front of you. At least then they have the information. I mean, I can't vote on this this evening without having all the information. So that's my comment.
Mayor Garou?
Thank you very much. The only flaw in that reasoning, if you will, is that you might ask people if they want to connect. You might have a project that it's 20 people, and 5 people might say, no, I don't want to connect. But the way we've done it in the past, those 15 other people will force that 5 people to connect.
Yeah.
So this is a motion to say we're not forcing anybody to connect. If a project moves forward, it's at the choice of the residents with the costs involved. But saying, the numbers you would get from people who say, I don't want to connect, but you're leaving on the table, they might be forced to connect. We had, in regards to capital charges bylaw, we had a lot of people in this room that said they don't want to pay an $8,400 charge, yet council in the past has forced people to pay $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 on a project they didn't want to be involved in. So I think, asking people, do you want to connect? They might say no, but depending what area they are in, currently, they might find themselves being forced to do so anyways. So I think this is pretty simple in my mind, where it's, I've heard horror stories of residents who this happened to in other districts where, her mom had to sell the house and move out of the area they grew up in because they couldn't afford that extra cost. So in doing this way, we're eliminating that scenario. The person wants to connect, it's their choice. They don't want to connect, that's their choice, and nothing is being forced upon them.
Councillor Chmowski.
Thank you. Another thing that came through our initial discussions on this, with a lot of residents talking about, being very concerned about not understanding the costs or not knowing the costs, and being forced into something that only 66% of people on their project would agree to. There's a lot of concern there, and I think that this kind of, again, is a move forward to alleviate the process. It's still, the discussion has to come forward on the rest, but I think that that's important. You mentioned earlier on, Councillor Lorraine, that some people will not connect regardless of the cost. And I agree with you, there are people that are in that category, but there are people that will possibly connect depending on the cost, but some of them just can't afford to do so. And so to give them that pressure or the added stress of thinking that maybe 1 year down the road they're going to be forced to spend $30,000, $40,000, $100,000, I just find it disconcerting. So this to me is a method of alleviating that stress completely at this stage, and then we can go by the process of looking at all the costs and seeing and being able to present something to a group, and if it's worth it, they'll connect, and if it's not worth it, they won't connect. But that decision will always remain with them under this process, as opposed to us having that power to do that.
Councillor Lorraine.
So maybe I'm missing something. Is this notice of motion for the capital charges, or is this notice of motion for capital project? Because they're two totally separate things.
Infrastructure costs. That's what this is referencing.
So this isn't the $8,400 that we're talking about.
No.
This is the capital costs of a project
That's correct.
that we're talking about.
That's correct.
Okay? Mr. Leduc, got a question for you. If we pass this notice of motion and put this into place, does this supersede the Municipal Act under local improvements and where where council can impose residents to be placed onto services without their vote or without their willing? Does this supersede that if we add it in? Because I believe that's what the mayor was saying, that this would protect the residents from being imposed.
Let's just be
Mr. Mayor.
Let's just be clear. This is guiding principles we accept as a council. This is not written in stone. If a project came forward, council still has the right to do everything it has done in the past. But this is just that this council is accepting these guiding principles that moving forward, this is what we would like to see. If council wants to change that at any point in time, it can fully do so. It's not a bylaw, it's not written in stone. But this, I think, is a good way of letting residents know what the intention of this council is. Now, if the intention of the council is to, to continue with status quo and to, you might find yourself in a position where council forces you to do it, council has that right. But the reasoning behind this was just to accept the guiding principles. It doesn't override anything else. This is a self-imposed direction that this council would be taking.
So then, if this council agrees to this, are we bound by it because we put it in place?
Nope.
Is that what it's saying?
We're
Then
just,
couldn't we make that decision at the time and not have a guiding principle document then? Isn't that what we're saying? We would make the decision at the time whether to force people to get on or not force them to get on or go through the whole process? I'm confused as to the relevance then of it. If we're not binding it, if it's not binding, then what good is it?
Councillor Janowski.
So a couple of points on that. So first of all, it's my understanding that any bylaw for that matter, or a guiding principle, could be changed through council. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So regardless of how it's structured, whether it was a bylaw or a guiding principle, it could always be reversed. I think that the intent here is, short of the ministry telling us, yes, these people have to connect because they don't have access or there is a health risk or something like that, that we would not impose infrastructure development unless it's covered for through the residents and it's in their choice. That's the intent behind it. So whether we move to do this as a bylaw or as a guiding principle or anything, it could be changed by the next council or anything. So this is just, again, to give some peace of mind to the residents that are currently kind of concerned by it. It's never going to be a perfect peace of mind because the next council can come and change it, just like any council can come and change the bylaw around it.
Councillor Moran.
So then, if I understand this correctly, then if there's a project where there's 50 houses and 40 of them don't want to go and 10 do, the 10 bear the full cost of the infrastructure to put those in. Is that my understanding?
That is correct.
So we're bearing all the cost on the 10 that want it and not imposing any cost on the 40 that don't want it and that may never want it.
That's correct.
And is there anything in place would there be anything in place then if they ever wanted to connect to it?
Yeah, that was the chart that was shown in the package where it shows the, so for example, somebody down the road decides to connect, their share is redistributed to the households that is a chart.
I just find it very confusing.
Yeah. Councillor Janowski.
So, Councillor Loren, if you look, we in developing the concept, the idea, we used a very simple example of a project with 10 homes, with one, and let's say the cost was $1 million. So one home wants to absolutely connect and doesn't care if anyone else connects. So we move ahead with the project. That one resident will bear all cost of it. But they know that ahead of time, and that's their decision whether they want to do it. Down the road, additional users connect. The person that connected, the household that connected in the first place, kind of gets their portion back. So if 2 connected, it would have cost $500,000 apiece. Therefore, the second connection, in this example, 2021, their $500,000 that they would have paid if there was only 2 connections goes back to the first resident. So in other words, you're kind of investing if you believe that other people will connect, or if you absolutely want to. The reality right now is if 4 people out of 10 want to connect, like as in the example you stated earlier on, there wouldn't be any infrastructure project. It would just not go because there's not enough to, based on the 66% rule.
I'm going to ask my question now. Okay, so I thought we were going with this 100% hookup requirement. So, and if in an area, 100% of the neighbors decide to hook up, are they paying a capital service charge, that 8,900?
That has nothing to do with this notice of motion, that's a completely separate discussion.
So we don't have the answer for that yet.
That, no more thing.
If I may.
Councillor Tanowski.
Yeah, if I may, so we had all agreed and discussed on a process to go through that, capital charges and getting some more feedback and going through all the different scenarios. That is still the standard process. The only reason behind this is to alleviate some of the concerns and lay the groundwork for an argument down the road to say that, is there gonna be that need? You know, so let's say we're holding, because there's 1,000 residents left, we're holding 1,000 whatever units, because we know eventually they'll connect. By having something like that, there's an argument to say that you don't need to hold as many because chances of everyone connecting are gonna be much smaller. So therefore, reducing the pressure in terms of having to hold that capacity. So.
And so if in an area, you're saying if 2 residents want to connect, they're going to get that infrastructure?
If they're willing,
Mr. Mayor?
if they're willing to pay for it, yes, they could get that infrastructure. And as this table shows, if their neighbors decide to connect down the road, those properties that paid the initial investment would be reimbursed as time goes on.
And I still want to also make sure that we have proper notification, because there's still a lot of residents up there that have no idea any of this is going on.
Yep.
One talked to me just this week, and they have no idea. Yes, Councillor Tanowski.
So to that point, I think this is just a small step of alleviating some stress out there of potential major expenses coming up. Our discussion on capital charges will still take place. It's my belief that it should still take place, that we should have continue in looking at the different options that are there, and hopefully the need for that, to have that high of capital charges, will dissipate with something like this in place. And so I believe that should still be very open and transparent, and all this is doing is just kind of reducing a little bit of pressure on the residents, and again, going back to our initial discussion with all the residents in here to kind of alleviate that. So that just kind of is an added, if you want, security blanket for those, for that not to have like that dire concern there, because that to me really troubled me when we were here. We had people saying that they would never connect, and so to think that someone that never will connect is going to end up paying for some of the infrastructure cost concerns me a great deal. Thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Laurent?
So, I understand the principle of it and trying to alleviate stress from some, obviously adding stress for others. If they're looking at $1 million, $2 million project that's going in, and they gotta bear the full cost of it to put it into one house, that kind of doesn't alleviate stress from that person. You know what I mean? Second piece of it is how are the units going to be calculated then, where we're not gonna hold the units? How do we know how many of these are not gonna wanna connect? Are we going out and asking them, like I suggested? Is that what's gonna happen here? Because we're not directing anyone to do it. So.
Wouldn't staff be able to answer that question?
Well, I think it's still a case by case or project per project discussion, from the perspective of being interested in connecting. And even with that, you can go out today, spend all these energy, and then in 2 weeks from now or in 2 years from now, maybe 50%, 5%, 100% of people have now moved out or changed, and now the position is completely different. So I know it's insulting the public at this point, but if there's no projects in their area at this point, I mean, these people we make reference to could be completely changed in 5 years from now or 10 years from now. So for us, it's kind of where we're standing about this.
I'll go with Councillor Janowski first and then Councillor Moran.
So Councillor Lorraine, just to remind you again that the process that's there right now, you would need 66%. So under the current setup, a person that absolutely wants to connect, doesn't care the cost, they couldn't do it. And so the fact that if one person wants to connect, they'd have all the stress because they have to pay for all of it is unrealistic. That wouldn't exist under the current scenario. So you would have to have 66%. And then the argument, if I have 66% or 7 people out of a street of 10 or a project of 10 people, you're still ending up forcing 3 people to pay for infrastructure that they don't want and perhaps will never want. So I think the argument of one person paying for everything or 5 people paying for everything, there's a balance there where it's still, they're in the driver's seat as opposed to, having someone control that for you. And I think that from a resident's perspective, again, if I was in that position, I would be able to rest a little easier understanding that I'm never going to be burdened by that if I don't want to do it.
Councillor Moran.
The other question I have is, it says on there, if I read it correctly, and maybe I'm not reading it correctly, but how does somebody recoup their money if somebody else connects? Because I think it says there the household at the time would get the money, yet it was the person who put it out. So how do we justify that person isn't getting back? And I'll use the example of one person paying $1 million. He's not selling his house for $1 million. So how does that one person get his money back? Because if one other person connects, that's $500,000 that person is owed. How does he get it back?
Councillor Janowski.
So using that example, it's obviously an exaggerated example of one person, but the example, the simplicity of the example is really, so if I'm selling my house and it is connected and I paid the $1 million and I'm selling that house, the value of that house obviously is going to be higher than the house next door that hasn't connected. And so the value of the house, so when you're selling it, sure, you may not recoup that $500,000 in this example because someone else will eventually benefit from it because someone else connects. The idea is that when you're selling your house that is connected, not only are you getting the value of the fact that it's connected, but you also have a value that if anyone else down the street connects, you're getting some sort of ristourne or like you're getting a rebate, you're getting something. So the house that you're purchasing, that you decide to purchase, will have that added value to it. So that's how you, because there's no way that we can go back, 15 years, 20 years down the road and find who were the original residents that paid for it. That it just wouldn't be practical at all.
Councillor Moran.
So I guess the question for the 2 members that put this out is, have you spoken to real estate agents about it and asking how much private services compared to municipal services, what that difference in value is? Because I did, and it's minimal, is what I've been told in the real estate community. So I'm not gonna get a significant jump, and I'm not gonna pay a premium on a house with a potential expectation of getting money back if somebody connects. Because if I'm there for 10 years and no one connects, and I paid a premium to get the house, expecting money to come in, I think we're asking something that's never gonna happen. So again, then we would have to go back to, are we sending the money to the original owner of the property who paid the money out of his pocket? And we would have that information, it would be on file, because the township would have had an agreement with them. So I think at the very least, we would give back the money to the person who connected, not the person who lives there now.
Mr. Ledoux?
Yeah, there might be surely 2 ways at least to get back to the original owner. One would be the like you just said, Mr. Duggan, the agreement we make with them and ask them to stay connected to us, because I'm sure they'll certainly would like to protect their own investment and say, well, if ever you get a check, please send it to me at this address. Or the other one is register on title. There could be some ways of doing it, but they know who they sell to, that there's a title there that's registered, and there could be some ways about it. So if that's the point, I'm sure we can find ways of getting that done.
clear. Thank you, Councillor Soto. So I think it comes back to, all the arguments come back to one simple fact. The resident is in the driver's seat. They're making the decision whether they want to move forward or not. Under this guiding principle, council is not forcing anybody to connect. The residents have the option to connect if they wish to do so. In what we've currently been doing is we have been forcing residents to pay for infrastructure costs that they did not want to do. And that can be a significant amount of money. So I believe that the residents should have the option to connect in the system if they so choose in this scenario. And this is very specific to residential within the village core. We're talking about the 600 houses, not what's going on in the future. But these areas, because as I mentioned, we were all here at that meeting, and a lot of people in the audience flatly said, I never want to connect to the system. And that's their choice. And this is just saying that if we allow, if we use current practices, we would be forcing some of those individuals. And personally, I don't think we should be doing that in this case.
I have another question on procedure. Can we have any questions from the public on this at this time?
If we want to allow a question period, then we suspend the rules of procedure.
That's what I was proposing.
Yep. So,
In favor of that?
Is there someone who has a question?
Well, I just wondered if anybody had a question in the audience from.
So
I'm fine with it.
So mover and a seconder to suspend the rules of procedure.
Okay, moved by Councilor Moran, seconded by Councilor Tanowski. All in favor?
All in favor of? Yep.
Okay.
State your name. Oh, sorry, your job.
Sheldon Bach,
Oh, I
65
want the
Air Creek
fancy
Road,
necklace
Russell.
next time. State your name, please, and your address. Oh, you did,
Sheldon
sorry.
Bach, 65. No problem, Connie. Yeah, I guess what I see is a couple of things that have developed over this conversation, where it started from. I think what you put forward does very much reflect the independence of people to decide if they want to join, and I compliment you on that work. I think it's very clear. What it doesn't address, though, is the capital development charge, where all this discussion started. And am I correct to assume the direction is, not approved yet, that because you've changed the last two words to growth units, that if I were to connect in 10 years, or somebody else that went ahead and brought in the infrastructure, that there would be a capital conversion charge at that time? Is that still going to sort of go ahead as an additional charge with this type of project?
Yeah, I'll have Mayor LaRue address that question.
So the thought process for me in this case, it has nothing to do with the capital charges bylaw. This has to do if, you know, currently we're in a good situation right now where we have 4,000 capacity of water, for example. And then 10 years, 15 years down the road, we've been in a situation where you don't have that capacity anymore. So for a resident has to realize that, you know, when the opportunity arises, there's the potential to connect, but if we start using all the available units and all of a sudden you decide to connect, then you say, well, I want to connect, but there's no units available. It's for the residents to understand there's no units being held for people who might decide to connect in the future.
So then what you see is coming today is the present system will come to capacity very soon.
No, not realistically. We have 4,000 units, but it's just for people to be aware. You know, for example, your street, the study comes, you decide, no, it's a little bit too much, I don't want to connect this year. And then you come back in 3-4 years, we'll do another study, hoping that there's grants or hoping it's cheaper. Oh, no, I don't want to connect this year. But realize that there's no units being held specifically for your area. All the units are whoever connects, and I'm not saying I don't believe we'll find ourselves in a shortfall, but looking to the past, it has happened. So that's where that thought process for me was coming.
So then, assuming the system has capacity, and I remember when this started, we said what we wanted to do is the capital conversion charge was to ensure we have ongoing capacity. And that's why you want to charge everybody, you know, that amount of money, so the system would grow as the community grows. Now, what I hear you saying, Pierre, is there's lots of room for growth for a while anyhow. And at least during that period, if I can make that leap, is there would be no need for a conversion charge. That wouldn't be put in place, would need to be put in place until our system started to get down near its limit. Is that
What I'm
correct
saying,
interpretation?
I'm saying this is a completely separate discussion, in my mind.
But
That'll
it
be,
isn't my
that'll be presented when the report comes on that subject. I'm talking strictly about infrastructure costs that I don't wish to force this upon everyone. As I mentioned earlier, I think Councillor Chinoski was fine. I have no problem removing that final section, stating that it's growth related. That's fine with me. I can remove that. That's not an issue.
But what you're proposing could affect homeowners if you go ahead with your conversion policy as you had previously tabled it, and they're trying to move forward.
And that'll be a discussion
Realistically,
at that
any
time.
new people would come, anybody new coming on would be charged that, whether there was capacity in the system.
That
or not.
hasn't been put in place by council.
But that's what that other policy was moving towards. So I guess what I feel might be happening here is you're taking one piece of it, which I've already said is a good piece, putting it aside with the hope of moving the other piece forward without complete consultation or understanding by community.
No.
I hope that's not the case.
No. Councillor Janowski?
If I may, I think certainly on my end, the two are completely unrelated, except for the fact that I will feel very comfortable if we have something like this to say that the existing capacity won't be pushed to its limits as much as it would have if everyone connects out of those 600 homes. So this, in a way, really encourages the people that truly want to connect, and it will reduce demand on that capacity. And by doing so, I'm able to sit here comfortably saying that I'm not going to look at the worst case scenario of everyone connecting, because now I know that chances of that happening are much smaller, and therefore the need for those capital charges at what they were set is not realistic. And that's I'm being, direct in telling you why I like this process.
I think with more details on the capital charge, that could well prove to be the case. I see your logic, and would like to see that evolve. The other question I had was follow up from our public meetings a while back, or at least here, public council.
Is it on this notice of motion?
Yeah.
The question has to be
Yeah,
on
it
this
is
notice of motion.
it is quite related, yes. Cut me off, so. At that meeting, there was questions about this famous 600. Was it part of existing, or did it need to be part of growth? And we still haven't got an answer on that, to my knowledge. I would still ask that be answered if it can at all, because I think that's, again, part of the whole idea of how we're moving forward.
That's coming up at the next meeting.
In regards to the capital charges discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
She's the boss.
Yep, understood. I'm just looking up. Jim Feely, 109 George Street. Just one more point of clarification. I'm clear on what's being said, and thank you very much for your further clarity you just offered. That was helpful. What's a little unclear is the capital charges for what's being proposed here is the capital charges will be completely up to the resident, and that's, if you choose to walk away, that's fine. You don't ever have to incur any capital costs. What's not so clear is if your street front is serviced with water, you were the one that abstained, are you required to pay any water or sewer charges of any kind? That's not clear.
Monsieur Maire?
Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Bourdon, is that coming as well during the capital charges conversion discussion?
Yeah, that'll be a topic we cover at that presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just jump, Mr. Councilor Laurent has a question.
So just so, no, I just want to further.
Go ahead.
Just to be just a little broader on my point, it's somewhat illogical to me that one would have to pay for something that we're pretty clear on this directive. You're abstaining from any cost, so this is more directed toward the administration as well. Abstain of any cost. You've been given the right to abstain from this service. It's somewhat illogical for me to assume that I'd have to pay, give or take $1,000 a year for the next life of my estate location for something I never asked for and don't want, and there's no, it just is illogical. So that was the purpose of the question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Laurent?
So I think it's been made clear that there's still questions about it, and that this does touch directly or indirectly the capital charges discussion that we're having, and that's why I'm still going to recommend to defer to the next meeting so that we can have this, see the full picture. Because as drafted right now, I can't support it. The chart itself, I'm not gonna sit here and spout off all the different recommendations that can go into it, because there's probably many. I can't support the bylaws written, so.
Harry Baker, Forest Road. I happen to be on a road that does have a water line, goes by my property. I did pay to have it installed, but I never hooked up. At the time I was told I had no choice. I just never got around to it. So I've never hooked up. I do pay a bulk rate for water to come by my property. I pay for the fact that I've got a fire hydrant across the street, which reduces my fire insurance. I have some benefits from that water line going across my property, as well as my neighbors are happy that need to hook up because their wells were not able to do what they needed. And if I ever had to, I would hook up as well. So I would be a person that would say that I would eventually, maybe, hook up, but I don't see the need at the moment. But I wanted to comment on the example that's given here. It's unfortunate it's
You have a
example
question,
given that
Mr.
way.
Baker? Sorry, it has to be a
Yes,
question.
I just want to know, what is the benefit of a person wanting to hook up under this scenario? He doesn't even get interest from the money that he's spent. He basically owns the infrastructure down the street. If I was a developer and I owned that, I would want to try to purchase and start developing that street because I have a big interest there. I just don't see what the interest would be for that person to foot the whole bill when there's really no benefit moving forward for him.
Mr. Mayor will respond.
That's up to the individual to decide. You might not see the benefit. Perhaps somebody with money in the bank says, I really love this house, I really want to stay here, but I want municipal services, I'm willing to pay. That's up to every single individual to make that choice.
Mr. Janowski?
And again, because it's an example, the possibility of one person on a budget to connect is impossible.
I know.
So I'm always looking at it from a comparison of the current 66%, and what would that represent?
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, we don't want to force anyone to pay the price, and with the hopes that there's enough encouragement as a group that there's enough money raised to do it, without putting any risk on the township or the taxpayers that are not going to benefit. So
when the water line was put down my street, I don't believe we paid the full cost of doing it. So I think one of the other things that's obvious here, and I'll ask the question, is this assuming that going forward, there's no infrastructure money coming to the province or the feds for any of these projects, because we're being asked to pay 100% of the cost?
Monsieur Mayor?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Leduc, Monsieur Bourgon. In my time, I haven't seen any funds from the province or the federal government for conversion from private services to municipal services. Is that correct? the project back here was not for that part of the project, it was for the twinning.
I would say that recently, most likely not, in this township. We know that some of the townships, in some cases of health considerations or, environmental concerns, some of them did get some money. That's the time when some connections do get assisted financing from the province. So it depends. It's not a straight no, and it's a possibility, but it's never a sure thing.
And just follow up on that, just to confirm as well, we have asked for a delegation on this very subject to at the OVRA conference, to ask the minister to look at putting some kind of program in place that would help with private conversions. So that is something that's being asked at the OVRA conference.
Councillor Chmowski?
And I think again with this process, if there was funding available, that would just reduce the cost, and so the people signing up would definitely benefit from that.
Well, there's no further questions from the public? Councillor Moran.
So I'm gonna ask to put an amendment on the table that we defer this item to the next meeting, or whenever the report comes back to council. I don't know if it's an amendment or whether it's just a question to council.
Motion to defer.
So motion to defer, and I'm gonna move it.
I'll second. All in favor?
All those against?
All those against?
The amendment is defeated. Yeah, the motion to defer is defeated.
Who was the seconder? No.
I'm gonna ask for a registered vote on the actual amendment of this.
The amendment?
On the amendment itself.
No.
You're asking for a registered
On-
vote on the amendment or on the
No,
motion?
on the notice of motion.
Okay.
Now that we're gonna vote on the notice of motion.
Okay. So,
I need coaching.
now it's the actual notice of motion.
Okay.
So now you're calling for all those in favor?
All in favor of the notice of motion? All those?
Against? So the notice of motion is defeated.
We have a registered vote, right?
Ouais, c'est un vote enregistré, c'est ça? Okay. Trade. Okay. Now we are done with resolutions, we now go to bylaws. Motion that council approve bylaws 2019-018 to 2019 inclusively. So 18 is the part lot control, property owned by Melanie Construction, Inc. And 19 being a bylaw to authorize letter of agreement between the corporation, Township of Russell, and Ministry of Transportation. That's item A. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councilor Saucier, seconded by Councilor Tanowski. All those in favor?
Hold on. Wanna make sure that, so just the two, just the two
Just the
items?
two, yes. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Item B, procedural bylaw. 2019-020 being a bylaw to govern the rules of procedure of Council of Corporation Township of Russell, report CL04-2019. Need a mover and seconder to put it on the table? Moved by Councilor Tanowski, seconded by Councilor Saucier. On a eu des discussions sur the procedural bylaw. Was there any changes to the existing chart that needed to be made?
It was the point brought up by Councillor Lorrain with respect to 3.1.1. I'm not sure though if there was an amendment or not to be made.
Let's pull it up here.
It was concerning the suspension for the notice of motion and the bylaw.
Oh yes, we had that discussion. Okay, questions, comments Amendments? Councillor Lorrain?
I'd just like to be clear what we're voting on, because we had discussed something else previously that you had asked direction from council on. So is 3.1.1 what's there, or is 3.1.1 something else?
No, currently it's what's there, and if somebody wants to make an amendment, then the amendment is made. We discuss the amendment, or
I'm gonna ask for the same amendment then. I'm gonna ask that we are allowed to suspend the rules of procedure to discuss the notice of motion, but that we cannot vote on the bylaw that evening. I'll move it.
moved. Is there a seconder?
What was the other discussion that we came up with?
That a notice of motion could only be discussed at the following meeting, as it was done tonight, as an example. So we have a mover by Councilor Lorrain, seconder. Okay, so seeing no seconder, it's not put on the table. I will make a amendment. I will move an amendment that says that the suspension of rules and regulations, just trying to figure out how to word it. The suspension of rules and regulations shall be out of order when dealing with a notice of motion. Does that make sense, Monsieur Le Duc? Madame Camille Laflamme? So it would say, currently it says suspension rules, regulations not permissible. Suspensions of rules and regulations shall be out of order when dealing with a notice of motion. So any notice of motion, you can't suspend the rules of procedure. I move that. Do I have a seconder?
I just have
We
a
just-
question.
Can't question till it's on the table.
Oh, okay.
So the seconder puts it on the table.
Yeah, but we still have to vote on it. And discuss and vote.
The seconder put it on the table.
Second by Councilor Kanaski. Questions? Councilor Associate?
Okay, so then, like, for instance, this evening with this notice of motion, and I suspended the rules of procedure to allow a question period,
That would be permitted.
that would be
Yeah,
permitted?
but what this would have done, for example, the notice of motion was presented 2 weeks ago. You could not suspend the rules and have the discussion and vote on it that same night. It would only be done, so whenever a notice of motion is brought forward, it would only be it will be part of the agenda, brought back 2 weeks later. Councilor Janoski, question? Okay. All those in favor? Register
On the
vote.
amendment?
So can we read it one last time?
So, Madame Camille Laflamme?
So instead of what is in red at 3.1.1, it would read the same title. The suspension of rules and regulations shall be out of order when dealing with a notice of motion.
Or we'll put it, we could also word it, make it simpler, shall not apply to a notice of motion. Would that be simpler and more direct?
Mm-hmm.
Shall not apply to a notice of motion. So you cannot suspend the rules of procedure to have a discussion for a notice of motion. It goes through the proper steps. Okay. So Councilor Lorrain asked for a registered vote. So on this amendment, all those in favor? All those against? Okay. Was there another item we had discussed that we needed changing amendments?
They were just the ones that I requested, I think,
That
to
you'll be
come
able-
back, I guess.
Yeah, so this is considered, we're giving notice that as long as you have them in for the agenda, then it's not an issue. Alors, Monsieur Le Duc, just to be clear for Monsieur Lorrain, you'd have to submit those by when? Next Wednesday?
And normally it's sent out before the Wednesday before the meeting, so it's next Wednesday. Yes, give us a chance to work on the chart. Maybe give us a 24-hour turnaround, maybe.
Because we could prepare the bylaw right away, only we wouldn't have to bring a chart, since it was, if it's only the ones that you mentioned.
Just the ones that I mentioned.
Okay.
So the one for the question period, 2-part, and the one about 17.11 about the mayor and the chair need not vote.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, so all those in favor as amended, c'est ça, Randy? All those in favor of the bylaw as amended?
Again, registered, please.
You unregistered? All those against? Okay. Moving on to item C, bylaw to establish code of conduct members of council. Motion that council approves bylaw 2019-021 inclusively for first, second, and third reading as listed on agenda. Mover and a seconder. Moved by Councilor Saucier, seconded by Conseiller Lorrain. Conseiller Lorrain.
I'm gonna request an amendment that we remove the second and third reading from the bylaw, I guess, or resolution, or whatever you wanna call it.
So second and third, so inclusively for first reading
For first reading.
as listed on the agenda.
Correct.
So moved by Conseiller Lorrain, seconded by Councilor Saucier. All those in favor of the amendment? Carried. Ça, c'est vraiment de first reading. Ça vient d'être approuvé, on n'est pas obligé de le faire encore. Item D, establish council staff relations policy. Motion that council approves bylaw 2019-022. Did I miss something?
Well, really, it would have been the first reading. So I guess we did it, Cindy and Jamie for the
Right.
first, and then we amended with Jamie and Cindy?
Right.
Okay, got it. Sorry.
So item D, bylaw to establish council staff relations policy. Motion that council approves bylaw 2019-022 inclusively for first, second, and third reading as listed on agenda. Moved by Conseiller Lorrain, seconded by Councilor Tanoski. Councilor Lorrain.
Same amendment.
All those in favor of the amendment?
Oh, we need a secondary.
Seconded.
Okay.
That was the main.
So all those in favor of the amendment?
Who seconded the amendment? You did? Okay.
All those opposed to the amendment? And carried as amended. All those in favor? Good, carried. Item 16, new business reports, we have none. 17, I'm gonna find my list. We had a few. Councilor Lorrain, budget items.
How about let the other one go, cause I have four or five items.
Okay, Councilor Saucier?
Mine's brief. Yeah, it was just, I had been requested by the Russell District Horticultural Society to invite council and staff to this, to their April 29th celebration. They're celebrating 100 years this year, and they're having a screening of the film Call of the Forest. And Diana Birdsford Kruger, who is an author and also did the film, will be present that evening, and she'll be there to answer questions after the film, so they want to extend an invitation to everyone.
Thank you very much. Have we provided an official invitation?
No.
No? Can you ask them to just send something
Yes.
official, and then we'll, Mr.
Yeah.
Leduc?
At this time, I raised with Council Soucy that we don't know exactly the time starts yet, so she
Yeah.
wants to get that confirmation, and once we do have that, then we can send
Send it out to correspondence
Yeah,
and to staff.
I checked today on their website, and it's still not filled in yet.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Item 17, budget items, Councilor Lorrain.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So I understand that the budget's gonna come for passing next week, and I wanted to bring, our next meeting, I guess.
The 19th.
I wanted to bring a few things to council's attention on it. The first one is the proposed increase to the user fees for the arenas. 5% operational was a request that was put in, and then I believe there was a request from the mayor to add an additional 15% surcharge on the user fees to be implemented, so a 20% increase for 2019. This on the back of a 5% increase last year as well, just so we know what's happening. That's 25% in 2 seasons. I'm gonna propose to that council considers that for the next meeting, for when we pass this, that a couple of different options, one that we spread it over a 3-year period, the 15%. I understand the 5% operational still not happy with it, but 5% this year, and then the 15% spread over 2 or 3 years, so that they can properly plan, the associations can plan for the next 3 years, knowing exactly what their increases are going to be. I would feel more comfortable with the 5/3, because it's going to be 10% in year 1, 5% in year 2, and then 5% in year 3. Those are significant increases on the back of a 5% last year as well. So at least it gives the associations time to plan for those increases when they're looking down the road for their fee structures. So that's one item.
Okay, let's discuss that one first. Councillor Tanowski?
So, I just want to be clear, I understand, so you said 2 or 3 years, and it's the 15%. And so would you be open, so let's say if we do it over 2 years, it would be 7.5% each year? That 7.5% would be like on top of the 5%, is that correct?
Correct.
Right, so.
In year 1.
In year 2, you'd be adding 7.5% on top of the increased.
Correct.
12%. And then that doesn't preclude us from having to perhaps make another adjustment of 5% like they did last year versus this year for operational.
That's correct. This isn't operational, and I'm not suggesting we take out the 5% operational this year, right? So the 5 is there, it's more the 15. I mean, ideally, I would like to spread it out over 3. And the associations that I've spoken to would like that to be spread out over 3 so that they could better project. So it would be 5 last year, of course, 10 this year, and then 5 and 5. And that doesn't mean that there's not going to be another 5 in one of those 2 years or 2.5 or something like that operational during that time. That's why I'm thinking the spreading out makes more sense. At the end of the day, you're going to get by year 3, you're getting actually more annually to that number because you've increased over the increase versus what you were going to get. So you make up some of that money that you're not getting up front. So
I'll just throw this out there because would you be open to 6.25% over 3 years, like each year? That way, council had based the original assumption on we're getting this much revenue from the user fees. If you do it at 6.25% year after year, then that would result in that number being, we wouldn't lose any of the user fee income coming, the extra for the complex.
I have no problem if we're going to divide it over 3 years, the full amount, operational plus the.
So it would be, instead of 15% in year 1, it would be 18.5 over 3, or 18.75 over 3 years.
He's not talking about the operation.
No, not operation.
Oh, okay.
So it ends up that your the contribution that was set in year 1, at the end of the 3 years, we still receive the same amount of money. So we're not losing those user fees. Long term, though, it will increase a little bit.
What did you say, 6 1/4?
6 1/4
times 3.
Times 3.
Plus the 5.
Plus the 5.
In year 1.
Yeah, so you're looking at 11.25, and then 675, 675 over 3.
I'll discuss with the associations and make sure that, and if they have no problem with it, then I will fully support that. Otherwise, I'll be requesting council at the time to look at changing it.
Yeah, and we can have those numbers confirmed by the administration. Councillor Tanowski?
Yeah, just to confirm those numbers, because you start with 625, then you said 675. So.
Sorry, it's.
Just want to confirm 625.
6.25 year, plus the 5% in the first year for operations. But that information can confirmed by our administration at that point.
Okay. And that during the next 2 weeks, I'll have a discussion with the associations.
Monsieur Leduc?
So for us, it's just a matter of making sure that whatever was supposed to be collected before being due over 3 years is collected. So that's kind of the purpose of whatever formula is 6.25 or whatever number.
Yeah,
The
it's
principal is to collect over 3 years the same amount as initially set by council at
for the
5%.
yeah for the what the amount of money collecting is not being reduced. The contribution that reserve was supposed to create it.
Okay. So again, I'll report back to council. And again, it's not, they say yes or they say no, it's council's decision, but
Mhm.
just to start making them understand of what's going on.
Yep.
Second item that I have is under Schedule A9 of the user fee bylaw, which is the swimming. So understanding that this complex could incorporate a swimming pool as well as rinks, as per our discussions, should we not be setting the same 15% surcharge on the swimming as well? And not just the users of the arena facilities? I think that's a fair distribution, and
Monsieur Leduc, Madame Guitar. I'm not sure what that represents the top of mind. I understand the premise.
I think whatever we impose on one, we impose on the other,
The
Yeah.
argument's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
so.
But as well as we had a comparison of what other arenas were charging, and we knew we were still under what a few other arenas were charging. I don't know if we have a comparison with pools in the area, but
It's more towards reserving for the future.
Yeah.
We're not, it's not operational.
No.
This is strictly the user fee piece, the amount that we're reserving for the canoe complex.
Yeah, Monsieur Leduc.
Maybe the only difference there would be the cost of building such infrastructure. For example, two rinks may be worth, I'll just give a number, 10 million, and one pool may cost 5 million. So therefore, you should have to take that into considerations by setting that premium. So we'd be looking at that to see if that's the case or not. But
Yeah, we're not at that point in time to decide what we're doing. but
Exactly,
I
so-
understand. Okay, Councillor Tanasi?
So I think the argument's very valid in doing that, but just like we looked at ice rates, we should do the same for the pool rates, a little bit like we alluded to. So if it's completely out of the park and it's not realistic, then obviously it has an impact. But if we can have a comparison and
So as this is not necessarily a budget item, because it doesn't affect the actual operational cost of the budget, similar to the other user fee increase, the 15% surcharge, doesn't affect the budget. So that component could be taken out of the budget piece in the next 2 weeks if we don't have any information on it, and we can vote on that separately at another meeting, right? Because it doesn't take effect until May 1st.
Does the
Or April 1st if it's the pool or whatever, right? So,
correct me if I'm wrong, Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Godin, once the budget's approved, we still have to approve the user fee bylaw, or are we planning to do it all in one?
I think our plan, like normally, is to have it all adopted in one.
But it's,
But it doesn't preclude council to come in later and amend the user fee bylaw anytime you wish to. So if it's done by end of May, it's still fine.
okay, so that'll be information that.
so
Yeah,
just so we're on the same page.
everybody's on the same page now? Okay,
The other one is, I guess for council to, again, take a look at the increases on the user fees for the daycare, considering the fact that we have a significant reserve in place, and what our actual strategic plan or goals are. Are we actually building another building? Is that what we're reserving for? And ensuring that if that's the case, that the current existing users understand that we're charging them more so that we can build a facility for others. So,
I think as well as to note that we do have some of the lowest rates in the United Counties. So even with the rate increase that's proposed, there's still the lowest rates.
no argument from that perspective, just even being the lowest rates, we're still reserving a significant amount of money
Yep, and that'll be,
on those users.
and that'll be part of council discussion, what we do with those reserves, right? Who knows, maybe it goes towards something we're building.
So what I'm saying right now is it's hard for me to support an increase on user fees
On that item.
The next item, I've received significant comments on the salary increases, 2%. I think we need to consider more of a 1.5, maybe 1.75 number rather than 2%. again, just for council to discuss. And the last item was the discussion around the mayor's position. I think I made my personal feelings very clear during that discussion. However, I've had significant, again, resident feedback, suggesting that it's not something that they would support, so.
Councillor Tarnowski?
Just to clarify on that, if Councillor Laurent, just to let, they wouldn't support the salary increase, not whether we had talked about it full-time or not.
The component of designating the mayor's position full-time, and we didn't even discuss salary. It's, do you think we need a full-time mayor? And you know what I mean? Like right now, I don't think, even for council, that there's a designation that council positions are full-time or part-time and mayor is full-time or part-time. Unless I'm missing something somewhere written.
I don't think there's any designation for any council
No.
member anywhere in Ontario as to whether it's a full-time or part-time position.
Right, so I would be leery at this point to designate the position full-time based on the feedback I've been receiving. So I just wanted to be as clear and upfront as I can. I don't wanna make it look like I'm backtracking on my personal feeling, cause like I said at the time, that's what I felt. But I represent the public, and the public have said to me, at least some members of the public have said to me, they don't feel that it's worthy of a full-time designation, regardless of salary.
Sure.
So, I'm just letting you guys know.
Perfect, thank you.
That's the last one on the budget. Can I make a comment as the chair of the planning committee about the heritage study that's coming up, the presentation?
Oh, Monsieur Leduc?
Before we move on to the next subject, I didn't see any reaction from council or direction. Okay, is that Mr. Dorian expressing his position, or is that council reflecting the same positions, or do we bring changes or not? Because we're planning to get this.
I think the only one I was comfortable with was looking at the user fees for the pool and stuff. Unless members of council want to act on the suggestions of Councillor Larang, I'm fine with what was done at the budget session.
And I'll bring these as amendments or items to discuss at the next meeting. I just wanted to give everyone a couple of weeks to absorb, seeing as how it's frowned upon, I guess, to email any comments, so I'm doing it in the public session, the public setting as recommended.
Councillor Tarnowski?
So just a procedural question then, so is it fair to assume that when we come to vote for the budget, we are gonna talk about the daycare reserve salary increases at that time, and we can have a discussion and debate on whether we accept them or not?
That's correct. So at that point in time, if Councillor Larang decides to make an amendment to the budget, then whatever the amendment is, we'll be able to discuss and vote on those amendments if council goes in that direction. Assuming he has a seconder for his amendment, and then it's on the table for discussion, and we give direction at that point in time. Councillor,
can we, in line with that discussion, can we ask administration to do a little research and give us, based perhaps on the Conference Board of Canada, what are the expected inflation rates for next year? And this would relate to the salary discussion. So there are forecasts out there, so we can be just more informed in that area, please.
And I think the administration, based on Councillor Larang's comments, would have what would be the impact to the budget in regards to the proposed changes by Councillor Larang. And that would have that as topic for information purposes. Councillor Tarnowski?
So I just want to clarify, so I asked to find out what the forecasted inflation rate is for next year, in addition to the understanding the impact. Is that what you're asking us? Okay, thank you.
Council administration is okay with that? Okay. Perfect.
Mention the heritage study meeting?
Yes, go ahead.
So on Thursday at 6 p.m. in this room, there's going to be the third public meeting. So whoever wants to attend, please show up for this meeting. I think the department will have a fantastic presentation, and therefore, if you do have concerns, please make sure you are here.
Thank you very much, Councillor Larang. Clarification, Madame Tremblay. Is it an actual presentation, somebody doing a presentation, or it's just boards all the way around the room again? Madame Tremblay?
So it's the third public meeting, so we'll present the draft report and the result from the survey and the study area that will be presented by the consultant. Yeah, so it's a sit-down meeting with the PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, but just to be clear, not a meeting of council.
Not
just
a meeting of council.
Public meeting presentation.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 18, public meetings, hearings, we have none. Item 19, motion to move into closed session at the hour of 9:44 p.m. to address matters pertaining to section 239 of the Municipal Act 2001, SO 2001. Item 1 for item 2B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal local board employees, as well as item 2 for the same clause. Need a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Tarnowski, seconded by Conseiller Lorrain. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. We are now in closed session. Be back in about 5 minutes.